Dust motes danced in the shafts of afternoon sun slicing through the blinds. The air in Ben's apartment was thick, with the smell of old coffee and something else, something that was just Ben. I ran a hand over my face, the stubble scratching my palm. "Should have made you clean this yourself last week, you bastard," I muttered into the quiet. My voice sounded wrong in here. An intruder. My job today was simple. Start packing. Box up the life of my big brother. I started with the closet. His whole wardrobe smelled like him. I grabbed a faded gray t-shirt, the fabric soft and thin from 1,000 washes. I held it for a second, then balled it up and tossed it toward a black trash bag on the floor. It missed. The shirt lay on the dusty hardwood, a sad, crumpled pile. My throat tightened. What the hell was I doing? I couldn't just throw him away. I walked over, picked up the shirt. My fingers traced the worn collar. I remembered him wearing this last Christmas, laughing so hard cheap beer came out his nose. I folded it. Carefully. I placed it on the bed, on top of a neat stack of things to keep. One shirt saved from the landfill. A tiny, stupid victory. With a sigh, I moved to the living room. My eyes scanned the big, cheap bookshelf he'd been so proud of assembling himself. I don't know why, but a sudden urge hit me. I needed to see it. The Little Prince, the beat-up paperback we both read until the cover fell off. Ben had taped it back on with half a roll of duct tape. I was certain it was on the second shelf, wedged between a thick science fiction novel and a stack of old magazines. I ran my finger along the spines. Dune. Neuromancer. A row of cheap thrillers with peeling covers. No Little Prince. That's weird. I scanned the shelf again, top to bottom. Nothing. I pulled a few books out, checked behind them. Just dust bunnies in the white of the wall. "Come on," I whispered. I checked the coffee table, a disaster of mugs and old mail. Not there. I checked the kitchen counter, just in case. No. I stood in the middle of the room, turning in a slow circle. It had to be here. Ben never moved that book. It was a permanent fixture, a landmark in the geography of his life. Maybe. My brain was fried. Grief makes you stupid, right? Forgets things, misplaces them. I probably saw it somewhere else, and my memory was just glitching. I walked into his bedroom. The bed was stripped, the folded t-shirt a lonely square on the bare mattress. And there, on the nightstand, sat a copy of The Little Prince. See? I thought, a wave of relief washing over me. Just losing my mind. Must have been reading it last week when I came by, left it here myself. Grief brain. That's all. It was the only explanation that made sense. Problem solved. I went to pick it up, to put it back where it belonged. But my fingers hesitated just before they touched the cover. Something was wrong. From across the room it looked right. But up close, the colors were too bright. The little boy on the cover wasn't faded. He was crisp, sharp. I picked it up. The spine didn't yield like an old friend. It was stiff. It crackled when I opened it. The sound of a brand new book. My heart started a low, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. I flipped a page. The paper was smooth under my thumb. Too smooth. And white. Blindingly white. Ben's copy had pages that were yellowed, soft, almost like cloth. Some corners were dog-eared into permanent triangles. Some pages had faint brown rings from where he'd set a wet coffee mug on them. These pages were perfect. Flawless. This wasn't his book. My breath hitched. Okay, calm down. Maybe he bought a new one. Maybe the old one finally fell apart and he replaced it. It's possible. It's a logical explanation. But Ben wouldn't do that. He loved that broken old thing because it was broken. My thumb flew through the pages, a frantic blur, heading for the one place that would prove it. The very last page. The inside of the back cover. When we were kids, I dared him to deface a book. He couldn't do it. But on the last page of this one, with a dying blue Bic pen, he'd drawn a tiny, lopsided smiley face. 2 dots and a wobbly, uncertain curve. It was his signature act of rebellion against the sanctity of literature. It was our secret. I reached the last page. My pulse hammered in my ears. I turned it over. The inside of the back cover was blank. White. Clean. Empty. Not a mark. Not a smudge. not a ghost of an indentation from a pen. It was a perfect, sterile, empty space where a memory was supposed to be. No. The word was a puff of air. What the hell is this? A cold dread, sharp and metallic, flooded my veins. This wasn't a new copy. This was a replacement. A counterfeit. Who would do that? Why? It made no sense. This was impossible. My heart was no longer drumming. It was slamming. A wild animal trapped in my chest. I threw the book. It hit the opposite wall with a hard, flat thud that echoed in the silent apartment. Not the soft whump of a worn-out paperback. The sound of a solid, alien object. I stumbled back into the living room, a single thought screaming in my head. The real one. I have to find the real one. It has to be here. It has to. I lunged at the bookshelf. My hands were claws. I ripped books from the shelves, not even looking at the titles. They rained down around me, hitting the floor with dull thuds, spines cracking, pages fluttering open, hardcovers, paperbacks, magazines. I didn't care. I swept whole sections onto the floor with my forearm. A cloud of dust billowed up, choking me. I coughed, my eyes streaming, but I didn't stop. I was on my knees, digging through the pile, my fingers numb, my breathing ragged and loud. Where is it? I gasped, the sound swallowed by the mess I was making. Where is it, Ben? Where did you put it? I tore through the heaps of paper and cardboard, frantically searching for a flash of duct tape, for the feel of a battered cover. But every book was just a book. Wrong shape, wrong size, wrong feel. This was crazy. I was going crazy. Right here, in the middle of my dead brother's living room, I was losing it. The grief had finally broken me. The energy vanished as quickly as it came. My arms went slack. I collapsed backward, slumping against the leg of the sofa. I sat there, breathing in dust, surrounded by the wreckage. The room was a disaster zone. Books lay broken-backed on the floor. Papers were scattered like dead leaves. Silence pressed in. A heavy, listening silence. My wild gaze swept across the chaos, and then it stopped. Through the bedroom doorway, I could see the book I'd thrown. It lay face down on the floor, its white back cover stark against the dark wood. It looked clinical. Wrong. I stared at it, my chest heaving. It was just a book. A stupid, wrong book. But as my breathing slowed and the ringing in my ears faded, I saw it. A detail my panicked brain had missed. On the pristine, white back cover, near the bottom corner, it was a line. It wasn't a scuff from hitting the wall. It wasn't a printing error. It was a scratch. A single hair-thin, perfectly straight line, about half an inch long. It was so fine, so precise, it looked like it had been scored into the glossy cardstock with a surgeon's scalpel or the tip of a brand-new razor blade. It was a deliberate mark, clean, intentional, and it was new, a full week past, or maybe it was 5 days. The calendar on the wall was still stuck on last month, a picture of a lighthouse Ben had circled because he thought it looked cool. I didn't have the energy to turn the page. I left the chaos in the living room. The books stayed where they'd fallen, a battlefield of paper and dust. I couldn't look at them. Every time I walked past the doorway, I saw the smooth white back of that counterfeit book, the tiny, perfect scratch near the corner. It felt like it was watching me, so I kept the bedroom door closed. Grief brain. I kept telling myself that. You saw something that wasn't there. You freaked out. You made a mess. Normal. It had to be normal. The funeral home called. They needed a picture. Something for the service. A smiling photo, they suggested. A recent one. That meant the laptop. Ben's old laptop, a silver brick that took forever to boot up. I'd been putting it off. The thought of scrolling through his life, his face smiling back at me from a cold screen. It was too much. But they needed it. So I dragged a kitchen chair into the dim living room, cleared a space on the coffee table amid the cold mugs, and set the laptop down. It whirred to life. The fan sounded like a tiny, dying animal. The screen glowed, illuminating the dust motes I'd stirred up. The desktop was a mess of icons. Game launchers, text documents, a folder named Taxes Suck, and another one, just labeled Pics. My hand trembled as I moved the trackpad. The cursor hovered over the folder for a long second. Click. Hundreds of files. Thumbnails popping into existence. Ben at a concert, beer in hand, yelling at the stage. Ben covered in mud after some stupid obstacle course race. Ben with our parents, years ago, looking impossibly young. Each picture was a little stab. I scrolled faster. A blur of moments I couldn't bear to look at. I wasn't looking for a memory. I was looking for a product. A face to put on a pamphlet. Then I saw it. The last one we took together. The airport. He was about to leave for that work conference. The one he never came back from. I'd given him shit for his bright orange tie. He'd told me to shut up and smile for the camera. A decent picture. Both of us grinning like idiots. It would work. It was the most recent. The funeral home would be happy. I clicked on it to open it full screen. And my scrolling stopped. My whole body went still. Wait. I squinted at the screen. Something was off. I remembered that moment perfectly. The harsh fluorescent lights of the terminal. The smell of Cinnabon in the air. The hurried, clumsy hug goodbye. I'd held up my phone, told him to say cheese. He'd thrown his head back and laughed. A big, stupid, genuine laugh that made the corners of his eyes crinkle up. I leaned closer to the screen. The image was sharp. Too sharp. In the photo I was smiling, a tired but real smile. But Ben was smiling too. His mouth was stretched into the right shape. The teeth were showing. But his eyes were wrong. They weren't crinkled, they weren't full of laughter. They were wide, open, staring straight ahead, right through the lens, right through the screen. They were flat, lifeless, like two polished brown stones. There was no light in them, no person behind them. It was the smile of a department store mannequin. My heart gave a hard, painful jolt. That's not right. That's not how he looked. I zoomed in. The trackpad felt slick under my sweaty finger. I pushed the magnification up, 200%, 400%. The pixels got bigger, blockier. But the eyes stayed the same. Empty. A perfect, dead replica of a human gaze. It wasn't just a bad photo. It was fundamentally wrong. It felt profane, like seeing a corpse propped up at a dinner table. A cold feeling spread from the base of my spine up to my neck. It was the book. The same feeling. The perfect, flawless copy of something that should have been worn and real. Now it was his face. The smile on the screen seemed to widen, but it was just a trick of the light, a trick of my mind. It had to be. But the eyes, they didn't blink. They didn't change. They just stared. I felt pinned in my chair. It felt like he was looking at me, not my brother. Something wearing my brother's face. Something looking out from inside my own computer, right into his apartment. Right at me. No. The word came out as a choked whisper. My mind raced, trying to find a reason. A logical reason. A glitch. A corrupted file. Maybe the camera on my phone was messed up. Maybe the laptop screen was distorting it. Anything but this. Anything but the impossible truth that was screaming at me. The original. I had to see the original. The photo was from my phone, but I'd backed everything up to his portable hard drive and then deleted them from my phone to save space. A stupid, practical decision I now regretted with every fiber of my being. I always backed them up. Except, he'd been the one to do it last. He'd taken my phone, plugged it into this very laptop, and copied everything over. Just in case, he'd said. The original file had to be on the SD card from my phone. He always did a direct copy. It had to be there. I shot out of the chair so fast it scraped against the wood floor. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I frantically scanned the disaster area. Where was the camera bag? I hadn't seen it in days. I kicked through a pile of fallen thrillers, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. My eyes darted around the room, over the heaps of Ben's life I had torn apart. There, a black nylon bag wedged under the edge of the sofa. I lunged for it, my hands shaking. I tore the zipper open. Pockets, lenses, filters. My fingers fumbled, clumsy and useless. Come on, come on! I found the small plastic case. I snapped it open. A row of tiny black squares. Micro SD cards. I tipped them into my palm, my heart hammering against my ribs. I couldn't remember which one was which. They were all identical. I ran back to the laptop, my shadow long and distorted in the screen's glow. The face was still there, watching. I couldn't look at it. I jammed the first card into the reader attached to the USB port. The computer made a small chime. A window popped up. Folder after folder. DCIM. Camera. I clicked through them, a frenzy of motion. Wrong card. Vacation photos from 3 years ago. I pulled it out, my fingers fumbling. I grabbed another one. Pushed it in. Chime. Another window. DCIM. Camera. My blood ran cold. The folder was empty. Wrong one. It had to be the wrong one. I tried the third. My last one. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely guide it into the slot. It clicked into place. The chime sounded again. Louder this time. Slower. A window appeared. I held my breath. DCIM. Click. Camera. Click. I saw the file list. I scrolled down, my eyes burning. My pulse was a roaring in my ears. The dates. I found the right date. The file name. IMG_8874.jpg. It wasn't there. I scrolled up. Down. Up again. Slower this time. My mind refusing to accept what I was seeing. The file numbers jumped. IMG_8872. IMG_8873. Then IMG_8875. The file was gone. Deleted. No, not just deleted. It was erased. As if it had never existed. All that was left was the copy. The wrong copy. The one on the laptop's hard drive. The one with the dead eyes. I stared at the empty space in the file list where my brother's real smile was supposed to be. A void. A hole where a memory should have been. A strangled sound escaped my throat. A mix of a sob and a scream. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't grief brain. Something did this. It took the book. Now it took the photo. It was replacing things. It was replacing him. Erasing him. With a yell, I grabbed the card reader and ripped it out of the USB port. The plastic strained. The connector screeched as it was torn free. I threw it against the wall, where it shattered into pieces. I stood there, panting, my chest heaving. My fists were clenched so tight my knuckles were white. The world had tilted sideways. Nothing made sense. My eyes fell back to the laptop screen. For a second after I pulled the drive, it had flickered to the generic blue desktop background. A calm, corporate landscape of rolling green hills. But it wasn't there anymore. The screen flickered again. Once. Twice. Then went black. And then a new image resolved itself out of the darkness. It was the photo, the one from the airport. But it was different now. It was zoomed in. All the way. The entire screen, from edge to edge, was filled with his face. No, not his face. Just his eyes. Those two perfect brown empty circles. The fake smile was gone. The airport background was gone. There was only the dead, flat mannequin stare, blown up to the size of my own head, staring out of the dark, unblinking, seeing everything. And I knew, with a certainty that froze the very marrow in my bones, that it wasn't just looking. It was waiting. The laptop screen was a window into hell. Two brown, polished circles stared out of it, wearing my brother's face as a mask. They filled the entire display, a grotesque parody of a close-up. The pixels pulsed with the low, electric hum of the machine. The light from them cast my shadow, huge and warped, against the wall behind me. It looked like a monster looming over a man. Maybe it was. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My feet were nailed to the floor. My lungs were stone. The silence in the apartment was a living thing, thick and heavy, pressing in on me from all sides. It was the silence of a tomb. The silence of the thing in the screen, the thing that was waiting. My mind finally broke free. A single screaming thought, "Get out!" But a second thought, colder and sharper, cut through the panic. And go where? Where do you go when the monster is inside your own computer? When it's stolen your own memories? Tell who? The cops? Officer, my dead brother's picture has the wrong eyes, and the original file is missing. They'd put me in a soft room. Someone has to know. Someone has to believe me. The thought hit me like a physical jolt. Chloe. Chloe. Ben's ex. They'd been together for 3 years. She knew him, the real him. She knew his laugh. She knew the way his eyes crinkled up when he smiled. She wouldn't think I was crazy. She had to be my anchor, my proof that I wasn't losing my mind. My phone. I needed my phone. I spun around, my eyes scanning the mess I'd made. The overturned books, the scattered papers, the cold coffee mugs. Where was it? My brain was a frantic blur of static. My gaze swept the room. Living room, kitchen counter, bedroom. The bedroom. I'd been in there before. I stumbled out of the living room, not daring to look back at the screen. I could feel the eyes on my back, a cold, physical pressure. I slammed the bedroom door behind me, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the apartment. My chest was heaving, gulping for air that felt thin and useless. The phone was on the nightstand, face down. I snatched it up, my thumb swiping clumsily at the screen. The bright light was a shock after the gloom. I fumbled through my contacts, my finger shaking so much it kept hitting the wrong letters. C-C-H. There, Chloe. My thumb hovered over the call button. A wave of doubt washed over me. What was I going to say? How do you even start this conversation? Hey, Chloe. Sorry to bother you. Ben's ghost is a Photoshop expert. I sounded like a maniac even in my own head. But the image of those eyes burned behind my eyelids. The flat, dead stare. I pressed the button. The phone started to ring. 1 ring. 2. Each one was an eternity. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat counting down to my own judgment. Please, pick up. Please, please, please. Leo? Her voice. It was tired, laced with a familiar sadness, but it was real. It was human. Relief hit me so hard my knees almost buckled. Chloe, I gasped. My own voice didn't sound right. It was thin and reedy. Chloe, thank God. Leo, what's wrong? Are you okay? You sound... I'm not okay. Something's wrong. Something's really, really wrong. I started pacing the small bedroom, a caged animal. It's about Ben. There was a pause on the other end. A careful silence. What about him? His stuff, the things he left here, they're changing. The words sounded insane as soon as they left my mouth. Changing? What do you mean, changing? I tried to explain. I started with the book. I told her about the Robert Parker novel, the pristine white spine, the perfect edges, the missing dog-eared pages, the copy that wasn't a copy. I could hear myself talking too fast, the words tumbling over each other. Okay, she said slowly. Her voice was cautious. Leo, maybe you just bought a new copy and forgot. Or Ben did. You've been under so much stress. No. The word was a shot. No. I know his books. I know that book. It wasn't his. And that's not all. I took a ragged breath, the image of the laptop screen flashing in my mind. The picture. The funeral home, they needed a picture. I found the one we took at the airport. The last one. I remember that one, she said softly. He looked happy. He was, I insisted, my voice rising. He was laughing. His eyes were all crinkled up, you know how he did. But on the laptop, Chloe? On the laptop, his eyes are wrong. Wrong how? They're dead. They're flat. There's nothing in them. It's like a mannequin, Chloe. It's a smiling mannequin with his face, and his eyes are just glass. I stopped, my breath catching in my throat. And the original file from my camera's memory card? It's gone? It's just gone? Something deleted it? Something left this copy? Silence. This time, it was longer. Heavier. I could picture her on the other end of the line, pinching the bridge of her nose, her brow furrowed with concern. Not concern about a ghost. Concern about me. Leo, she said, and her tone had changed. It was gentle. Too gentle. It was the voice you use on a scared child or a cornered animal. I know this is hard. I know how much you're hurting. Grief, it can do strange things to your mind. It makes you see things. It plays tricks on you. This isn't a trick. My voice cracked. The walls of the bedroom felt like they were closing in. Her pity was a smothering blanket. This is real. I'm looking at it. The book is real. The picture is real. Someone or something is in this apartment, and it's replacing his things. It's erasing him. Leo, stop, she said, her voice firmer now. The gentleness was gone, replaced by a weary frustration. Just stop. You're exhausted. You haven't been sleeping. You need to rest. It's just the stress talking. No, you don't understand. I was practically begging now, pacing faster. It's not stress. I'm not crazy. I didn't say you were crazy, Leo. I said you're grieving. There's a difference. Her voice was getting colder, more distant with every word. She was building a wall between us. I was on one side, with the dead eyes and the wrong books, and she was on the other, in the normal world where things made sense. Ben is gone. You have to accept that. You can't invent these stories to torture yourself. Every word was a nail in my coffin. Every reasonable, logical sentence was another shovel of dirt on my face. She was sealing me in. She wasn't my anchor. She was the one who was going to cut the rope and let me drift away into the dark. Desperation clawed at my throat. She was my last chance, my only chance. You don't believe me? I screamed into the phone, the sound raw and torn. It was a primal cry of utter, absolute isolation. The silence that followed was sharp, final. When she spoke again, her voice was stripped of all emotion. It was flat, clinical. Leo, she said, I think you need to talk to someone, a professional. I think you need help. And then she hung up. Click. The sound was tiny, but it hit me like a sledgehammer. The line went dead. The faint, empty buzz of the dial tone filled my ear, a monotonous, unending hum. It was the sound of the world giving up on me, the sound of being completely and utterly alone. A choked, strangled noise ripped out of me. I threw the phone. It hit the comforter on the bed with a soft thud, a pathetic, unsatisfying impact. I sank to my knees on the cheap carpet, my head in my hands. It was over. No one would believe me. No one would help. I was trapped here. Trapped with it. I stayed there for a minute. Or maybe it was an hour. Time had stopped making sense. The only sound was my own ragged breathing and the frantic pounding of my heart. Then, a new sound. A vibration. I looked up. The phone, lying face up on the bed, was buzzing. The screen was lit up, casting a pale, ghostly light onto the ceiling. It was ringing. Someone was calling me. My body moved on its own, a desperate, reflexive lurch. Maybe it was her. Maybe she'd changed her mind. Maybe she was sorry. Hope, stupid and stubborn, flared in my chest. I crawled a few feet to the bed and reached for the phone. I turned it over in my trembling hand, and my blood turned to ice. My heart didn't just jolt. It stopped. It seized in my chest, a cold, dead weight. I stared at the screen, at the name glowing there in bright white letters. The caller, ID. It wasn't Chloe. It was one word. 4 letters. B-E-E-N. The custom ringtone I'd set for him years ago filled the silent room. An old punk rock song he loved. Fast, loud, and angry. It sounded obscene now. A party in a graveyard. My finger hovered over the green answer icon. It was right there. All I had to do was touch it. Just a touch. And I would hear... what? What would I hear? His voice? Static? The sound of those dead, flat eyes? The phone continued to buzz in my palm, a frantic, insistent life. It felt like holding a scorpion. Every vibration was a sting of pure terror. My throat closed up. A thin, whining sound escaped my lips. I couldn't do it. I couldn't answer. I didn't want to know what was on the other end of the line. I stared, paralyzed, as the name glowed on the screen. Bin. 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 been... It called and called and called, and I didn't dare answer. The ringing stopped. The silence it left behind was worse. It was a vacuum, sucking the air from my lungs. The phone in my hand was just a piece of cold plastic again. Ben. The name burned on the screen for another second before it went dark. I stayed on the floor, on my knees. A hollow animal sound crawled up my throat. I was alone. Chloe thought I was crazy. The world thought I was crazy. And the thing that killed my brother was calling me on his phone. There was no one to tell, no one to help. It was me and it. Here, in this apartment. A new thought, hard and cold as a shard of ice, cut through the panic. Prove it. Not for anyone else. Not for Chloe. Not for some cop who would jot it down in a notepad and call for a psych hold. For me. I had to know, one way or the other. I had to know if I was losing my mind or if I was being hunted. I needed a control, an experiment, a single solid piece of evidence that couldn't be explained away by grief or exhaustion. I scrambled to my feet. My legs felt like they were filled with sand. My eyes scanned the room, the mess, the memories. I needed an object, something specific, something with a secret that only I would know. My gaze landed on a small, velvet-lined box on Ben's dresser. Inside was his watch, not a fancy one. An old pocket watch, silver-plated, that our father had given him for his high school graduation. It was one of the few things he truly treasured. I walked over to the dresser, my movements stiff and jerky. I opened the box. The watch lay there on its faded blue lining. It looked normal. The face was white, the numbers Roman, the little second hand still. I picked it up. Its weight was familiar in my palm. Cold and solid, this was it. This would be the test. I flipped it over. On the back, our dad had gotten it engraved. A tiny, almost unnoticeable inscription near the hinge. Just 2 letters and an ampersand, hidden in the scrollwork. L&B. Leo and Ben. It was our secret, a stupid little thing from when we were kids. A pact. Our dad had remembered. I ran my thumb over the letters. They were still there. Faint, but there. Okay. I needed a trap. A way to know for sure if it was touched. I rummaged through the junk drawer in the kitchen, my hands shaking, scattering old pens and rubber bands. I found it at the bottom. A cheap UV marker I'd bought for a party years ago. The kind of thing you use to write secret messages that only show up under a blacklight. I even had the stupid little blacklight keychain that came with it. I went back to the bedroom, I put the watch back in its box, I closed the lid. The little brass clasp clicked shut. It sounded like a cell door locking. I took the UV pen and, my breath held tight in my chest, drew a clean, invisible line across the seam where the lid met the box. A perfect, unbroken seal. No one would see it. No one would know it was there. But I would. This was insane. I was setting a trap for a ghost, or a hallucination, or whatever the hell this thing was. But it was the only thing I could do. I placed the box back on the dresser, exactly where it had been. Then I had to leave. I had to give it time. I had to give it the opportunity. I grabbed my keys and my wallet. My jacket felt heavy on my shoulders. I walked to the front door, every muscle in my body screaming at me not to go, not to leave the experiment alone. He was leaving the mouse in the cage with the snake. I pulled the door open, stepped into the hallway, and locked it behind me. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home felt final. I just needed food, an excuse. I walked to the elevator, my footsteps echoing in the empty hall. I didn't want to be out here, but I couldn't stay in there. Waiting, not knowing. The city was noise and light. Cars honked. People brushed past me on the sidewalk, lost in their own worlds. For a second, everything felt normal. I was just a guy going to the corner store, but my skin was crawling. Every face in the crowd seemed to be watching me. Every shadow felt too long. I bought a sad-looking sandwich and a bottle of water, my hands fumbling with the cash. I didn't taste it. I just needed to kill time. I walked. I didn't have a destination. I just walked, block after block, letting the city flow around me. I walked for what felt like an hour, maybe more. Long enough. It had to be long enough. The walk back was a different kind of hell, The streets seemed darker. The shadows were deeper. Every step closer to my apartment building was a step closer to the verdict. My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild drumbeat of hope and terror. Please be there. Please be untouched. What was I hoping for? That I was crazy? Or that I wasn't? I didn't know which was worse. I stood in front of my apartment door. 4B. It looked like any other door in the hallway. I pulled out my keys. My hand was shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the key in the lock. I took a deep breath, a breath that did nothing. Then I turned the key. The door swung open into silence. The apartment was exactly as I had left it. The mess was still there. The air was still and dead. I closed the door behind me, locking it. I stood there, listening. Nothing. Just the low hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. I walked straight to the bedroom. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need them. I pulled the little black light keychain from my pocket. My thumb fumbled with the tiny switch. A small cone of purple light cut through the gloom. I aimed it at the box on the dresser. My breath caught in my throat. The line was there. The faint, ghostly line of the UV ink glowed back at me. It was perfect. Unbroken. Exactly where I had drawn it. A laugh escaped my lips. A dry, shuddering sound. It wasn't real. It was me. It was all in my head. The stress. The grief. Chloe was right. I was just a man who had lost his brother and was cracking under the weight of it. The relief was so intense, it almost brought me to my knees. It was a horrible, painful relief, but it was relief nonetheless. I wasn't being haunted. I was just sick. Laughing at myself, at my own stupidity, I walked over to the dresser. I flicked on the lamp. The soft yellow light filled the room, chasing away the purple glow. I reached for the box. I unhooked the brass clasp. Click! I lifted the lid. The pocket watch was still there. It lay on the blue velvet, gleaming under the lamplight. It looked fine. Nothing out of place. It was over. It was really over. My hands were still trembling, but with relief now, not fear. I reached in and picked up the watch. The metal was cold against my skin. I turned it over in my hand, ready to see the familiar L and B, ready to finally put this nightmare to bed. I looked at the back of the watch, and the world ended. My blood didn't just turn to ice, it evaporated. My heart didn't stop, it shattered. The spot where the initials were supposed to be was smooth, wiped clean. The scroll work was still there, perfect and intricate. But the letters were gone. Gone as if they had never existed. And in their place, in the center of the watch's silver back, was a new engraving. It wasn't crude or scratched in, it was perfect, done in an elegant, flowing script with the same professional precision as the original scroll work. It was 3 words. You already lost. A strangled gasp ripped from my chest. My fingers went numb. The box slipped from my other hand, clattering onto the hardwood floor. The watch fell from my grasp, hitting the carpet with a soft, dull thud. I stumbled back, my eyes locked on the watch. On the message. It knew. It knew I was testing it. It had played my game. It had let me see the unbroken line. It had waited for me to feel safe. And then it showed me this. A signature. A taunt. A declaration of victory. At the exact same moment, a sound exploded from the living room. Zist. It was the sound of a television snapping to life. The harsh, electric crackle of a CRT screen powering on. My head whipped around. I stared through the bedroom door into the darkness of the living room. The TV was on. The screen was a churning sea of black and white static, a snowstorm of dead pixels. I never left the TV on. I never even used it. And then, through the hiss and crackle of the static, a voice came from the television speakers. It was a whisper, garbled, distorted, stretched and compressed, like a recording played on a dying tape machine. But beneath the digital filth, I knew that voice. Oh God, I knew it. It was Ben. Found you, Leo. The whisper slithered out of the static, a dead snake coiling in my ear. Found you, Leo. Ben's voice, but wrong. Stretched thin, chewed up by digital noise, but it was him. A primal scream built in my throat, but died before it could escape. My body moved on its own, a puppet on strings of pure terror. I launched myself from the bedroom, feet slipping on the hardwood floor. I didn't have a plan. I just needed to kill the sound. The TV screen was a blizzard of white noise, a portal to nowhere. The hissing filled the room, the whisper weaving in and out of it like a needle. I didn't reach for the plug. I didn't look for the remote. I lifted the heavy glass lamp from the end table, the one Chloe had always hated, and I swung. The crash was a thunderclap. A shower of glass and sparks exploded outwards. The screen imploded in a flash of blue-white light, and a final, agonized electronic scream died into a fizzing pop. Then, silence. The kind of silence that rings in your ears after a gunshot. I stood there, panting, the broken neck of the lamp still clutched in my hand. My knuckles were bleeding where they'd scraped the wall. I didn't feel it. I could still hear it. The whisper. It was burned into my brain. Found you. It was in the apartment. The watch, the phone call, the TV. It wasn't a haunting. It was an invasion. My gaze darted to the front door. The deadbolt was thrown. The chain was on. But it felt as thin as paper. A useless gesture. I dropped the broken lamp. I grabbed the heavy armchair, the one Ben used to sit in, and grunted as I shoved it, wedging its back under the doorknob. It wasn't enough. I scrambled to the dining table, my body fueled by a new, frantic energy. I pushed it against the armchair, creating a clumsy, makeshift wall of wood and cloth. It looked pathetic. It looked insane. I didn't care. I needed a weapon. Not a lamp. A real weapon. I ran to the hall closet, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Shoved behind a stack of old board games and a vacuum cleaner, I found it. Ben's old Louisville Slugger. The wood was smooth and solid in my hands. It felt real. It felt like something that could do damage. I didn't go back to the bedroom. I couldn't. I backed into the living room, into the corner furthest from the barricaded door and the darkened bedroom doorway. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, the baseball bat held tight across my lap. My eyes scanned the room, from the door, to the window, to the hallway. I was a cornered animal. My trap was set. My territory was marked. I sat there all night. I didn't sleep. Every creak of the building, every siren in the distant city sent a jolt through my system. My muscles screamed. My eyes burned from staring into the shifting shadows. I just sat and waited. Dawn came not with relief, but with a slow, gray resignation. Light seeped through the blinds, painting dusty stripes across the floor. The city outside woke up with a low hum of traffic and life. For a single stupid second, the normality of it was a balm. Maybe I had won. Maybe I had survived the night and it had gone, bored of its game. Maybe the light of day would keep it at bay. That's when I heard it. It wasn't a creak. It wasn't the building settling. It was a sound that didn't belong. A scratch. Soft. Quick. Like a single fingernail being dragged across metal. I froze, the bat tightening in my grip. My ears strained. My head tilted. It wasn't from the door. It wasn't from the window. It came from above. My eyes slowly, unwillingly, lifted to the ceiling. To the square, metal grill of the air conditioning vent set in the center of the living room. It was just a vent. A plain, beige rectangle with slats. I had lived here for months. I had never once paid any attention to it. Now, it was the most terrifying object in the world. I held my breath, listening. Nothing, just the faint hum of the refrigerator. Had I imagined it? Was my sleep-deprived brain just making shit up now? Please, God, just let me be crazy. Let that be the answer. And then I saw it. From the seam where the metal grill met the plaster, a single, black droplet was forming. It swelled, defying gravity for a long moment, shimmering in the weak morning light. It was not water. It was too thick and too dark. It fell. It landed on the hardwood floor with a soft plip. The sound was small, but it echoed in the silence like a gunshot. I stared at the spot. A small, perfect circle of black was spreading on the wood. It looked like ink, or old oil. Another drop formed. Swelled, fell, plip. My barricade was a joke. I had spent the night guarding the front door like an idiot, and the whole time, it was above me. It wasn't trying to get in. It was already here. The smell hit me then. It wasn't rot. It wasn't the smell of death. It was the smell of rust. of old wet pennies, a coppery, metallic tang that coated the back of my throat. It was the smell of the watch after its engraving had been wiped clean. My mind finally screamed the one thought I'd been pushing away. My trap with the UV marker. The unbroken line. It wasn't a mistake. It hadn't gotten a fake watch into the box. It had gotten into the watch. It had changed it from the inside out. And now it was getting into my apartment. A third drop fell, then a fourth, in quick succession. A steady, rhythmic drip of black fluid onto my floor. Plip, plip, plip. A diseased water clock, counting down the last seconds of my sanity. I got to my feet, my legs shaking. I held the baseball bat in front of me like a shield, pointing its tip at the ceiling. "What do you want?" I whispered, my voice cracking. The dripping stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It was a listening silence, a waiting silence. Then, with a sudden, violent screech of tortured metal, the vent cover flew downwards. It didn't fall. It was punched out from above. It slammed onto the floor with a deafening clang, spinning on its edge before crashing flat. The black liquid splattered outward, spraying across the floorboards in ugly streaks. I didn't think. I just yelled, a raw, ragged sound torn from my lungs. I swung the bat upwards, a wild, reflexive arc aimed at the dark, square hole in my ceiling. The bat slammed into the plaster next to the vent with a hollow thud, sending a spiderweb of cracks through the paint. I'd missed. There was nothing to hit. I stumbled back, lowering the bat, my chest heaving. My eyes were fixed on the opening. It was a patch of perfect blackness, a void in the middle of my ceiling. I braced myself for a face, for a hand, for something to come crawling out. Nothing, just the hole, just the silence. I took another step back, my heel skidding in the slick black goo. I kept my eyes on the hole, my whole body coiled and ready to run. Something moved in the darkness. It wasn't fast. It was a slow, deliberate push. An object was being nudged out of the vent. It slid over the edge, hovered for a second, and then dropped. It landed on the floor with a soft, wet thud right in the center of the black puddle. It was a book, a small, hardcover book with a familiar, faded, blue cover. My breath hitched. I knew that book. It was Ben's copy of The Little Prince, the original one he got as a kid, the one I'd been looking for everywhere since he was gone. It lay there, soaking in the filth, a memory desecrated. A piece of my brother returned to me as garbage. That was the message. It wasn't just here to kill me. It was here to erase everything. I could see the book clearly now. It was open. It had landed open to the very last page. Or what was left of it. The page where the little prince asks the pilot to draw him a muzzle for his sheep, where they say their goodbyes before he returns to the stars. It was gone. It wasn't just a tear. It had been systematically, painstakingly ripped to shreds. All that was left was a ragged stub of paper clinging to the spine. The torn page was a scream in paper form. I could almost hear it. Ben's book. His goddamn book. It lay in the puddle of black filth, an island of desecrated memory. The thing in the vent hadn't just dropped it. It had performed an autopsy on it. It had surgically removed the ending, the hope, the part where the little prince might be okay. It had left only the void. My mind finally snapped back into gear. The rage and terror fused into a single, sharp point of action. I had to call the police. That's what a sane person would do. And right now, I desperately needed to believe I was a sane person. I backed away from the mess on the floor, keeping the bat pointed at the hole in the ceiling. My phone was on the kitchen counter, where I'd left it last night. My hand shook as I jabbed at the screen. 911. The dispatcher's voice was calm, a woman's voice from a different universe. 911. What is your emergency? My own voice was a stranger's. A cracked, breathless thing. Someone's in my apartment. Or they were. I don't know. They came through the vent. Silence. Then, "Sir, did you say they came through the air vent?" "Yes." They dropped. Something. There's black liquid all over my floor. I sounded like a lunatic. I knew I sounded like a lunatic. "Are you hurt, sir? Is the intruder still there?" "No, I don't think so." The hole is empty. But they destroyed things. My TV. They left something. Okay, sir, stay on the line. What is your address? I gave it to her, my eyes darting between the front door, still barricaded, and the obscene black square in the ceiling. The minutes it took for them to arrive felt like a prison sentence. Every sound from the hallway was the thing coming back. Every tick of the clock was it laughing at me. Finally, a heavy knock on the door. Police! Open up! It took me a solid minute to unbuild my pathetic fortress of furniture, my muscles screaming in protest. I pulled the armchair away, pushed the table back, my hands slippery with sweat. When I finally undid the deadbolt and the chain, 2 uniformed officers were standing there. One was older, with a tired gut and a mustache. The other was younger, sharp-eyed, his hand resting near his sidearm. They took one look at me, wild-eyed, sleep-deprived, holding a baseball bat, then scanned the apartment. They saw the smashed television. They saw the barricade I'd just dismantled. Their expressions tightened. "You the one who called?" the older one asked, his voice low and patient, the kind of voice you use on a spooked animal. "Yes, over here." I led them to the living room, pointing with the bat. The vent cover, the liquid, and the book. They looked. The younger cop nudged the metal vent cover with his boot. The older one knelt down, careful not to touch the black stuff. He squinted at it. "Looks like grease, or maybe oil from the fan motor up there," he said, looking up at the hole. He didn't seem concerned. He shone his flashlight up into the darkness. "I don't see anything, son. It's just an empty duct." "But the book," I insisted, my voice rising. "It wasn't there before. That's my brother's book. It's been missing for months." The older cop looked at the book, then back at me. His eyes were full of a weary pity that was worse than disbelief. "You've been through a lot, haven't you, Mr. Evans? Your brother, Ben, wasn't it?" How did he know? I must have told the dispatcher. My brain was a sieve. "Yeah," I managed. "Sometimes, when we're grieving, we misplace things. Find them in odd spots. The mind plays tricks." He stood up with a grunt. "There are no signs of a forced entry. All your locks are intact. The TV, did you do that?" I couldn't lie. "Yes." There was a voice. He and his partner exchanged a look. It was a look that ended the conversation. It was a look that said, "We have a nut job here." "Okay, son," the older cop said, his tone shifting from investigation to de-escalation. "We're going to file a report. But our advice? Get some sleep. Things will look clearer in the morning. And maybe think about calling your doctor. There are people who can help you sort through all this." He gestured vaguely at the apartment, at me, at the mess that was my life. They left. I watched them walk down the hall, their heavy footsteps receding, leaving me in a silence that was louder than before they'd arrived. They hadn't helped. They had confirmed my worst fear. I was alone in this. Utterly, completely alone. I closed the door, not bothering to lock it this time. What was the point? The locks were a joke. I was in a cage, and the monster was already inside. Exhaustion hit me like a physical blow. I left the mess on the floor. I left the bat. I stumbled towards the bedroom, my body moving on autopilot. I just needed to lie down, just for a minute. I pushed the bedroom door open and stopped dead. On my bed, laid out perfectly flat against the gray comforter, was a shirt. Ben's shirt. His favorite one. A simple blue Oxford cloth button-down. The one he wore in half the pictures I owned. The one I'd been meaning to take to the dry cleaners for months. It had been hanging in the closet, stuffed in a garment bag. Now, it was here. As if presented for inspection. My heart, which had just started to slow, kicked back into a frantic rhythm. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't move. I just stared. It was clean, it was pressed, it looked normal. But its presence on my bed was the most abnormal thing in the world. It was a statement. I was in your closet. I can go anywhere. I forced my legs to move, one leaden foot after the other. I approached the bed like it was coiled with snakes. The fabric looked right. The color was the pale blue I remembered. No black stains, no tears. I reached out a trembling hand, my fingers brushing against the cotton. It was real. And then I saw it. No, I felt it first. I ran my thumb down the front, over the line of buttons. My brain stuttered. It tried to process an input that made no sense. Something was wrong, deeply, fundamentally wrong. I looked closer, my eyes tracing the line of stitching. The placket, the buttonholes. The buttons were on the left side. Men's shirts have buttons on the right. Women's shirts have them on the left. It's a stupid, archaic detail from a time when rich men dressed themselves and rich women were dressed by their maids. It's a detail you never ever think about. Until you do. This was Ben's shirt. I knew it. But the buttons had been moved. Not replaced. They were the same pearlescent buttons. But they had been painstakingly unstitched and resewn onto the opposite placket. It was a perfect job. Flawless. But it was backwards. It was a mirror image. A perversion. This wasn't a ghost. A ghost wails and rattles chains. This wasn't a simple burglar. A burglar steals things. This was an artist. A sick, meticulous artist of madness. And I was its canvas. It wasn't just replacing things. It was corrupting them. It was taking my memories of Ben and twisting them, one detail at a time, until he was no longer the person I knew. It was a second death, a murder of his memory, and I was the sole witness. A sound cut through my spiraling thoughts, the sound of running water. It was coming from the bathroom connected to my bedroom, a steady, hissing spray. I hadn't used that shower today. The cops hadn't been in my bedroom. My blood ran cold. The shirt was a distraction, a piece of theater to hold my attention. I snatched the baseball bat from where I dropped it in the living room. It felt heavy and useless in my hands. How do you beat an idea with a piece of wood? I crept back to the bedroom doorway. The bathroom door, which I always left ajar, was now shut. Closed tight. My feet made no sound on the rug. I moved like a specter in my own home. I held the bat up, ready. My body was a taut wire of adrenaline. I reached the bathroom door. I could hear the water clearly now, pounding against the tile inside. I pressed my ear against the cool wood of the door. The sound of the shower was loud, mechanical. Who was in there? What was in there? Then the water stopped. Not a tapering off. It cut out, abruptly. 1 second, the hiss of the shower. The next, a profound, ringing silence. A silence that was heavier, more expectant than any sound. I held my breath. My ear was still pressed to the door. I could hear the frantic drumming of my own heart. I could hear nothing else. And then it came. Tap. A single, soft sound. Quiet. Deliberate. Firm. It came from the other side of the door. Right where my head was. A knock. From the inside. A choked scream died in my throat. I threw myself backwards, tripping over my own feet, and crashed hard onto the floor. The bat flew from my grip and clattered against the wall. I scrambled away on my hands and knees, crab-walking backwards, my eyes locked on the door. The knob began to turn. Slowly. With an agonizing, metallic squeal. It turned all the way, and with a soft click, the latch disengaged. The door swung inward. On its own. It didn't fly open. It drifted open, a silent, mocking invitation. I stared into the bathroom, my body braced for a lunge, for a man, for a monster. There was no one there. The room was empty. It was filled with a thick, white steam that swirled in the air. The shower curtain was pulled back. The tub was empty and wet. The small window was latched shut. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. My ragged breaths were the only sound. I got to my feet, shaking, my mind screaming at the impossibility of it. I had heard it. I had felt it. The knock was real. My eyes scanned the empty room again, and then they landed on the mirror above the sink. It was completely fogged over, a blank, gray slate, almost blank. In the center of the condensation, someone had drawn a picture. A single, crude drawing, traced by a fingertip in the steam. It was a smiley face. The same vacantly staring eyes, the same lopsided, mindless grin. The exact same one that had been drawn on the last page of the book, the one that was now gone. It was a signature. And as I watched, frozen in horror, a single drop of water condensed at the bottom of the drawn smile, hung, suspended for a moment, and then trickled down the glass. Like a single black tear. The tear rolled down the drawn smile, and my sanity went with it. I didn't scream. The sound was stuck somewhere in my chest, a hard, sharp thing lodged behind my ribs. The smiley face stared. The drip of water was the only sound in the universe. I backed away from the bathroom, one step, then another. My bare feet were numb on the rug. My eyes stayed locked on the fogged-up mirror, on that mindless, idiotic signature. It knew I was watching. It was a performance. My breath came back in a ragged gasp. The spell broke. I wasn't just a spectator anymore. I wasn't going to stand here and let my mind unravel thread by thread. The cops thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. It didn't matter. Crazy or not, this was happening. I had to stop trying to explain it to a world that couldn't see it. I had to start understanding the rules of this new, sick reality. A switch flipped inside my head. The raw fear didn't vanish, but something cold and sharp grew up alongside it. Purpose. I was a rat in a maze, but even a rat can learn the turns. I turned my back on the bathroom, a deliberate act of will. I walked out into the bedroom. The shirt was still there, laid out on my bed like a funeral shroud. Ben's shirt. The wrong shirt. I didn't touch it. Not yet. I went to the living room. The black puddle was still on the floor, the ruined book sitting in its center. I skirted the mess, my gaze fixed on my destination, the small end table by the couch. The framed photograph was there, the one I glanced at 100 times since I put it there, the one that had felt off. I picked it up. My hands were steady now. It was a photo of me and Ben, taken last year at some family thing. We were smiling, two brothers, arms around each other's shoulders. But I looked closer now, with new eyes. Ben's smile wasn't quite his. One corner of his mouth was turned up just a fraction too high. His eyes, they weren't looking at the camera. They were looking just past it, at something over the photographer's shoulder, at something I couldn't see. It was almost perfect. Almost him. I carried the photograph back to the bedroom and placed it on the nightstand next to the bed. Then I went to the closet, to Ben's side of it, the side I hadn't touched. I found his watch box. I opened it. His everyday watch, the one he wore until the band broke, was gone. In its place was a new one, a cheap, shiny knockoff. It looked right at a glance. Same silver face, same leather strap. But I looked at the Roman numerals. I, 2, 3, 4. 4. Ben's watch used IV. It's a tiny detail, a watchmaker's choice. But Ben was a creature of habit. His watch had IV. This one had 4. It was wrong. Intentionally wrong. I took the watch, the photo, and the shirt from the bed. I laid them all out on my small bedroom desk, side by side. A collection of corruptions. An exhibition of my personal hell. The shirt with the buttons on the left. The photo with the wrong smile and the wandering eyes. The watch with the wrong number 4. The book in the other room with the missing ending and the smiley face. I stared at them. My pulse was a low, steady drum. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was an investigator. The fear was a tool now, honing my focus. There was a pattern here. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't random violence. A ghost wouldn't be this detailed. A common burglar wouldn't take the time to re-sew buttons on a shirt. This was planned. Every change was deliberate. A perfect copy, with one single, screaming flaw. A flaw designed to be found. A flaw designed to tell me something. But what? That I was losing my mind? The message was already received, loud and clear on that front. No, this felt different. This felt like a language. A set of symbols. It wasn't just trying to drive me mad, it was trying to talk to me. My eyes fell on the photograph again. Ben's face. That almost smile. What else was wrong with it? I'd focused on his eyes, his mouth. But I forced myself to see the whole picture. The background. His clothes. He was wearing a dark suit, a white shirt, a tie. A tie. It was silk, with diagonal stripes of silver and dark blue. A typical, boring, corporate tie. But Ben never wore diagonal stripes. The realization hit me not like a wave, but like a shard of ice shoved into my gut. He hated them. He thought they were generic, unimaginative. He used to joke that they were the official uniform of soulless drones. He owned dozens of ties, solids, pin dots, small paisleys, but never, not once, a tie with diagonal stripes. I knew this. I knew it like I knew his birthday or his stupid laugh. It was a part of the brother I had stored in my head, and this picture violated that memory. The thing that made this copy, this perfect fake, had made a mistake. It didn't know Ben? Not really, it just knew what he looked like. It had gotten the big picture right, but it missed the small human detail. The tie. The tie was the key. My breath hitched. My mind, which had been a fog of terror, suddenly became a search engine. Where had I seen that tie before? It was familiar? Not from a store window. I had seen it on a person. I stumbled out of the bedroom, past the filth on the living room floor, and grabbed my laptop from the coffee table. My fingers flew across the keyboard, clumsy and shaking. I pulled up my cloud storage folders, photos, years of them. Christmas 2018, no summer barbecue 2019. No, I clicked through albums, my eyes scanning an endless gallery of a life that was now over. Ben laughing, Ben frowning, Ben with friends, with family. Then I found it, an album labeled Starkwell Launch Party 2021. Starkwell Solutions, Ben's company, his pride and joy. I clicked it open. Dozens of photos, men in suits, women in dresses, all holding glasses of champagne. I scrolled, my heart hammering against my ribs. There, a group photo. Ben in the center, beaming, and two men to his left, his business partners. One I knew, the other was wearing the tie. Silver and dark blue diagonal stripes, the exact same one. It was draped over the chest of a man with slicked back hair and a smile that was all teeth. A man whose handshake was always too firm, whose eyes were always a little too cold. Cade Nyenin, Ben's partner, the money man, the one Ben brought on when the company started to take off, the one I never, ever liked. He always smelled of expensive cologne that couldn't quite cover something rotten underneath. It wasn't a mistake, it was a clue. The picture wasn't just a corrupted memory of Ben. It was a message. It was a finger, pointing. The artist wasn't just mocking me. It was showing me a piece of the puzzle. It had replaced Ben's tie with Cade's tie. Why? My hands were ice. My throat was dry. I opened a new browser tab. The cursor blinked at me, waiting. With a sense of final, irreversible dread, I typed Cade's name into the search bar. Backquote. Cade Nguyen. Backquote. I hit enter. The results loaded instantly. News articles, business profiles, press releases. But it was the first headline that made the world stop. It was a local news site, dated 2 months ago, right around the time Ben died. The words seemed to float off the screen, branding themselves onto my brain. Prominent tech entrepreneur Cade Nguyen reported missing. Disappearance coincides with sudden death of partner Benjamin Evans. I read it again and again. The words didn't change. Missing. He was missing. Ben didn't just die. Cade didn't just vanish. They were connected. And this thing in my apartment, it was connected to both of them. The shirt, the watch, the book, the photo. They weren't attacks. They were warnings. They were evidence. They were a breadcrumb trail left by a ghost or a monster or something in between, leading me straight to the truth. A new kind of terror washed over me, colder and deeper than anything before. This wasn't about a haunting. This wasn't about a random break-in. This was about murder. And the game wasn't over. Ben wasn't the first victim, and I was beginning to understand I wasn't going to be the last. My eyes flickered from the screen to my own reflection in the dark laptop monitor. Behind me, on the desk, the corrupted items sat in a neat row, staring back, waiting for my next move. The hum of the laptop fan was the only sound. Cade Nguyen, missing. The words on the screen weren't just letters. They were a key, turning a lock deep inside me. The fear didn't go away. It changed. The frantic, cornered animal terror receded, and in its place, something cold and sharp settled in my bones. An electric current of purpose. This wasn't a haunting. This wasn't some random act of psychological warfare. This was a message, written in a language of wrongness. I wasn't the audience. I was the recipient. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping against the wood floor. The sound was loud in the dead air. My eyes left the screen and found the desk in my bedroom. The exhibit, my private museum of madness. The shirt, the watch, the photograph, lying there under the lamplight like evidence in a sterile lab. Evidence of what? I hadn't understood, until now. I walked to the desk, my steps measured. I was no longer a rat in a maze. I was the one trying to read the map the maze was drawing. I looked past the items, my gaze landing on the book I'd left on the floor. The one with the black inky puddle and the drawn smiley face. The Little Prince. Ben's favorite. The copy his mom had given him years ago. I had focused on the defilement, the ink, the mocking smile. I had missed the real clue. I crouched down, ignoring the sticky residue on the floorboards, and picked up the warped book. I flipped through the damp pages. The story was there, the familiar words and drawings. I got to the end, the final illustration of the boa constrictor that has swallowed an elephant. Then the author's final plea to the reader. And then, nothing. The last page, a heavy, cream-colored stalk, was blank, but it shouldn't have been. A memory surfaced, clear and painful. Ben, age 14, sitting on his bed, carefully writing on that exact page. For years it was his ritual. Whenever he finished the book, he'd write a short, one-line letter to our mom on the last page. Just a sentence, "I miss you," or "thinking of you today," or "wish you could see the stars from here." The book was a living document, a silent conversation with a ghost. The last time I saw it, it was covered in his familiar, spiky handwriting. Now, it was clean, wiped. As if the conversation had never happened. As if it had been silenced. It wasn't just a missing ending, it was a statement. The line was cut. Communication over. My breath hitched. My eyes darted to the desk. The watch. I picked it up. It felt cold and heavy. The cheap, fake gleam of the metal caught the light. I had seen the replacement of the Roman numeral IV with 4. I had seen the shoddy craftsmanship. But my focus had been on the one detail I hadn't told the cops. The one that felt too personal, too insane to share. The subtle engraving on the back. Ben's original watch, a gift I'd given him for his 30th, had our initials engraved on the back. J and B. Jacob and Benjamin. A stupid, sentimental detail. This copy had something else. 3 words, crudely scratched into the metal. You lose. I'd read it as a taunt from my tormentor. A simple, brutal declaration of victory. The final score. But with the news about Cade open on my laptop, with the silence of the last page of the book in my mind, the words looked different. I held the watch closer. My thumb traced the rough letters. What if it wasn't a complete sentence? What if it was a warning, not a taunt? The thing in this apartment, the artist of these replacements, wasn't just showing me that things were wrong. It was telling me why they were wrong. It was spelling it out for me. My mind raced. The tie, in the photo. It wasn't just a random tie. It was Cade's tie. It put Cade in the picture with Ben. The watch? What if it wasn't, "You lose"? What if the subject was implied? What if it meant Ben lost? Lost to what? Or who? My gaze snapped back to the watch. What if the pronoun was missing? He lost to it. A chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room crawled up my spine. It wasn't a game I was losing. It was a battle Ben had already lost. A battle against an it. I placed the watch down carefully, my hand shaking. My eyes fell on the last item. The shirt. Ben's favorite blue button-down, but with the buttons on the left, the women's side. An inversion. A reversal. A simple, physical declaration that something was backward. Wrong. I ran my finger over the perfectly stitched buttonholes. It wasn't ripped and resewn. It was manufactured this way. A perfect copy. Made fundamentally incorrect. Made, replaced. Replaced. The word echoed in the new, silent architecture of my thoughts. It wasn't a random assortment of clues. It was a story, a sequence. Each item was a chapter. Chapter 1, the photograph. It didn't just corrupt my memory of Ben. It connected him to Cade. It put Cade's tie on Ben's chest. It was showing me the point of infection. Chapter 2, the book. It showed me the result of that infection. Silence. The end of Ben's conversation with the world, with his past. An erasure. Chapter 3, the watch. It was the epitaph, the final word. He lost to it. Chapter 4, the shirt. It was the method, the how, an inversion, a copy, a replacement. The pieces didn't just fit. They slammed into place with the force of a physical blow. A narrative of horror was laid out on my desk. This thing, this presence, whatever it wasn't trying to drive me crazy. It was trying to make me sane. It was screaming the truth at me in the only way it knew how. A language of flawed replicas. My mind, no longer a fog of fear, became a ruthless engine of logic. Follow the story. It started with Cade, the tie, the news report. He went missing. He was the first one replaced. An entity, an it, had taken him, worn him like a suit. Then, walking around as Cade, it got close to Ben, his business partner, his friend. It got close, and it did it again. It replaced him. That's why Ben's death was so sudden, so inexplicable. A heart attack at 34. Easy. No questions asked. Ben wasn't dead. The real Ben was gone. And a copy was walking around with his face. And the thing in my apartment, the one leaving these clues, it wasn't the same entity. It couldn't be. The killer wouldn't warn me. The killer wouldn't leave a breadcrumb trail pointing directly to its own methods. This was something else. A witness. A ghost in the machine. A remnant of the real Ben, or something tethered to him, desperately trying to wave a red flag before the copy came for me. Because that was the only logical next step. It took Cade. It took Ben. I was next. The air in the room became thick, unbreathable. I was choking on the revelation. The game wasn't about me being haunted in my apartment. The apartment was the last safe place. It was the briefing room. The real threat was outside. Walking, breathing, wearing my brother's face. I stumbled back from the desk, a strangled sound escaping my throat. My legs felt weak. I had to see. I had to look. It was an insane, irrational impulse, but I couldn't stop it. I scrambled from the bedroom past the sticky puddle on the living room floor and lunged for the front window that overlooked the street. My fingers grabbed the grimy sill. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, my breath instantly fogging a small circle. The street below was quiet. A few parked cars gleamed under the orange glow of the streetlights. A plastic bag skittered across the asphalt, pushed by a late-night breeze. Everything was normal. Everything was still. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the grief and the fear had finally pushed me over the edge into a full-blown, psychotic break. Then I saw him. Across the street, standing in the deep shadow of an old oak tree, was a man. His back was to me, just a silhouette, but the set of his shoulders, the way he held his head, it was familiar. A painful, impossible familiarity. My pulse roared in my ears. He stood perfectly still, as if waiting. As if he knew I was watching. The world seemed to shrink until it was only my window, and that single, dark figure across the street. Time slowed. He moved. Not quickly. It was a slow, deliberate motion. He turned, the shadows peeling away from him as he stepped into the direct cone of light from a streetlight. My breath left my body in a single, silent rush. The world tilted on its axis. It was Ben. He was wearing the clothes they'd buried him in, a dark suit, a white shirt. He looked exactly as I remembered him from the last time I saw him. Healthy, alive, impossible. He lifted his head. His eyes scanned the front of my apartment building, floor by floor, window by window. Then they stopped. They locked directly onto mine. There was no flicker of recognition, no shock, just a flat, predatory stillness. And then he smiled. It wasn't Ben's smile. It wasn't the warm, lopsided grin that could light up a room. It was the smile from the photograph, the one where the corner of the mouth was turned up just a fraction too high. An anatomically perfect smile, completely devoid of warmth or life. A mask pulled tight over something cold and ancient and terribly, terribly hungry. He saw me. And he knew that I now knew. The game was over. The hunt was on. My back slammed against the wall. I ripped the curtain shut, the cheap fabric scraping across the rod. The image was burned onto my retinas. The streetlight. The shadow. The face. Ben's face. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. My heart was a fist, hammering against the inside of my ribcage. I slid down the wall, my legs giving out, my jeans snagging on the rough plaster. I landed hard on the floor. My breath came in ragged, useless gasps. This is it. This is the break. The final snap. I stared at the opposite wall, at a water stain shaped like a crooked country, and focused on it. A real thing. A normal thing. Grief does this. It makes you see things. It rewires your brain until the circuits spark and short out. The things on the desk, the news article, the man outside. It was all just a story my broken mind was telling itself. A way to make sense of the senseless. That had to be it. Please, let that be it. A clean, clinical diagnosis was better than the alternative. So much better. The room was silent. Too silent. The hum of the fridge was gone. The traffic outside was gone. The world had gone mute. All I could hear was the frantic drumbeat in my chest, and the roar of blood in my ears. Then, a new sound cut through the noise in my head. A vibration. It was on the coffee table. My phone. The screen lit up, casting a cold, blue glow across the floor. The buzzing was harsh, angry. It sounded like an insect trapped under glass. I didn't move. Who would be calling at this hour? The police? With more questions I couldn't answer? No. It was a private number. Blocked. I watched it buzz, each vibration a small shock to my system. Let it go to voicemail. Don't answer. Don't engage with the nightmare. The buzzing stopped. The silence rushed back in, heavier this time. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. It started again. The same angry buzzing. More insistent this time. Not a call you could ignore. It knew I was here. It knew I was looking at it. My hand trembled as I reached for it. My thumb hovered over the green icon. This was insane. I was sitting in the dark, terrified of a phone call, after seeing a ghost. I was a character in a bad movie. But I had to know. The small, desperate part of me that still clung to logic needed one more piece of data. My thumb swiped across the screen. I pressed the phone to my ear, my knuckles white. Hello? My voice was a dry rasp. Silence. Not a dead line, it was an open line. I could hear a faint, distant hiss, like the sound of an empty radio frequency. A waiting kind of silence. Hello? Who is this? I demanded, trying to sound firm, but failing. A sound crackled through the speaker. It was a noise that didn't belong in a phone call. It was a wet, scraping sound like rusted metal being dragged through gravel. Then, a voice. Or something like a voice. It was shredded, machine-like, each syllable a burst of static. It is not him. The words were low, distorted, as if they were being forced through a broken speaker. A chill, sharp and clean, shot down my spine. I couldn't place the voice. It was just noise shaped into words. What? Who is this? I pushed myself up, my back flat against the wall. My eyes darted to the curtained window. Cade, the static hissed. The name hit me like a physical blow. Cade Nean. The man from the news report. The missing partner. That's not possible, I whispered. The scraping sound came again. Louder this time. It was followed by a sound like a gasp, or a failed attempt at one. It got me. First, the words were spaced out, each one an effort. A copy. It wears my face. It wore my face and got close to Ben. My mind was reeling. The tie in the photograph. Cade's tie on Ben's chest. The point of infection. The voice on the phone, the ghost in the machine, was confirming it. This wasn't my madness. This was happening. It killed him, I said, the words plain and dead in the air. No, the static ground out. Worse. It replaced him. Now, it wants you. The last piece. The end of the memory. The voice was getting weaker, the static overwhelming the words. He lost. I lost. Don't let it win. Jacob, you have to. The voice was suddenly choked off by a piercing squeal of feedback. It was a physical pain, a needle of sound stabbing directly into my ear. I cried out, yanking the phone away, my whole head ringing. The squeal was deafening, a shriek from a digital hell. It filled the apartment, bouncing off the walls. It was the sound of a connection being violently severed. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. Complete. For a single, beautiful second, I thought it was over. Then a new voice came from the phone's speaker. It was perfectly clear. No static. No distortion. It was rich, warm, and horrifyingly familiar. It was Ben's voice. Looks like the little ghost's game is over, little brother. My blood went cold. It didn't just turn to ice. It felt like it vanished from my veins entirely. I was hollow. A shell. I stared at the phone in my hand as if it were a venomous snake. You know now, don't you? The voice continued, a hint of amusement in its tone. That casual, easygoing cadence I knew better than my own. Good. Honestly, this makes things so much simpler. The whole charade was getting a little tiresome. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. My throat was sealed shut. The thing that was my brother was talking to me through my phone. The thing that was standing across the street just moments ago, it was toying with me. It had been toying with me all along. The warnings weren't warnings. They were part of the game. The wrong items weren't clues from a spectral ally. They were a script. A pre-show to the main event. And the ghost of Cade? A puppet whose strings had just been cut. I have to admit, the voice mused, the witness angle was a clever touch. Gave you a nice little thread of hope to cling to, didn't it? Made you feel like the hero figuring it all out. A soft chuckle. Ben's chuckle. But the truth is, Jacob, you were never reading the map. You were just the rat in the maze. And you've reached the end. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall and shatter it into 1,000 pieces. But I was paralyzed. My body was no longer mine to command. It was a block of cement. Are you there, Jake? Don't be rude. The voice was chiding, playful. The same tone he used to use when I was a kid and wouldn't come out of my room. It's time to finish this. The collection is almost complete. My eyes were locked on the front door, on the deadbolt and the chain lock, thin, useless pieces of metal. A sound came from the hallway outside my apartment, a soft, metallic scratching. My breath hitched. My hearing sharpened, focusing on that single, impossible sound. It was coming from my front door. From the outside. The scratching stopped. Then came another sound. A sound that made my heart stop. Click. The sound of a key sliding into a lock. My lock. I scrambled backwards on the floor, my hands and feet scrabbling for purchase, crab walking away from the door like a terrified animal. My brain finally kicked back into gear, screaming one single, primal command. Run. The phone was still in my hand, still broadcasting that placid, monstrous voice. That's my key, Jake. You know, the one you gave me? A sign of trust. A key to your home, your safe place. The key turned. The tumblers in the lock clicked over, one by one. A neat, mechanical sound. The sound of my world ending. Clack. The deadbolt unlocked. There we go, Ben's voice said, both from the phone in my hand and now muffled from the other side of the door. It was in stereo, all around me. Nowhere to run. The doorknob began to jiggle back and forth, testing it. The only thing holding it shut now was the flimsy chain. "Come on, Jacob," the voice cooed, intimate and low. "Don't make me break down the door. That's so messy. So uncivilized. We're brothers, after all." I was on my feet, stumbling toward the back of the apartment, toward the bedroom. The living room felt huge, a barren no-man's land I had to cross. My eyes stayed glued to the front door, to the thin metal chain pulled taut in its bracket. The doorknob stopped jiggling. A moment of silence. Wham! The door shuddered in its frame. A splintering sound echoed through the room. It was testing the chain, testing my resolve. "Open the door, Jacob." The voice was no longer playful. It was flat, a command. "The game is over." "Wei Cham." More wood splintered. The door frame groaned. A tiny crack of white appeared near the bracket holding the chain. My legs finally worked. I turned and sprinted. Past the couch, past the coffee table, past the sticky patch on the floor where the little prince had been. I slammed the bedroom door shut behind me and fumbled with the lock. It was a cheap, push-button lock. A privacy lock. It wouldn't hold for a second. I looked around the room, frantic. The window, the fire escape. 3 floors down. I could make it. I lunged for the window, my fingers finding the latch. Crack! A sound from the living room. Louder this time. The chain wouldn't hold against another hit. "Last chance, little brother," the voice called from the living room. It was inside. It was in my apartment. I threw the window open. Cold night air hit my face. The rusted metal of the fire escape was just a foot away. Freedom. "I wouldn't," the voice said. It was right behind me. I froze, my hand on the window sash. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I just stared out into the night, at the brick wall of the building next door. "You've seen the shirt," it said softly. "The watch, the picture. You've heard the silenced voice. You understand the grammar of it all now, don't you?" Silence. "Those were just to get you ready, to prepare you. They were old things made wrong." I could feel its presence behind me. A cold spot in the room. I could hear the soft shift of fabric as it took a step closer. "I'm so glad you're finally caught up," it whispered, its voice right next to my ear now. Ben's voice. "Because I have something for you." My eyes squeezed shut. I braced for the blow, for the end. "Open your eyes, Jacob," it commanded. I did. "I brought you a gift. Something new to add to your collection." Its arm moved past me, into my line of sight. It was wearing the sleeve of the suit they buried Ben in. Its hand came into view, holding something out over the windowsill, into the dim light from the street below. It was a photograph, a simple, square Polaroid. The image was of me. I was in my bed, asleep, one arm thrown over my head. The photo was taken from the foot of the bed, from inside the room. The angle was intimate, predatory. The smile returned to its voice, the same terrible, wrong smile from the photograph of Ben. "This one isn't a replacement, Jacob. This one is an original." My brain didn't process the image, only the threat. Instinct, pure and primal, took over. My body moved before my mind could scream. I shoved. Hard. My palms struck the thing's chest, the fabric of the suit coarse and wrong under my hands. It stumbled back a step, its balance surprisingly light, an empty thing. The Polaroid fluttered from its grasp, landing face down on the floor. I didn't wait to see it recover. I spun, grabbed the bedroom door, and slammed it shut with a bang that shook the walls. My thumb found the cheap push-button lock on the knob, and I jammed it in. Click. A useless, pathetic sound. A child's privacy lock against a nightmare that had walked through my front door. My breath was gone. My lungs burned. I backed away from the door, my eyes locked on the simple brass knob, expecting it to turn, to pop open. My gaze darted to the window. The fire escape. The cold night air felt like a promise of freedom, but it was a lie. It was 3 floors down to a dark alley. The thing had been outside on the street. It was a cage. The whole building. The whole world. No, not a cage. A tomb. My eyes landed on the dresser. Ben's old oak dresser. Heavy. Solid. Made of real wood. Not the particle board crap they sell now. My muscles screamed in protest before I even moved. I didn't care. Adrenaline was afire in my veins. I lunged at it, my hands finding the top edge, my sneakers struggling for grip on the worn floorboards. Scrape. The sound was a torture. A screech of wood on wood that set my teeth on edge. It was heavier than I remembered, weighted down with a life that was no longer here. My back bowed, my tendons stretched to their breaking point. I grunted, a raw, animal sound, and heaved. The dresser moved an inch, then another. I put my shoulder into it, my cheek pressed against the cold, lacquered wood. I could smell the faint scent of Ben's old cologne, a ghost in the grain. The smell made me want to vomit. I finally got it wedged tight against the door. It covered the knob, the frame, everything. A solid wall of oak and memories. I collapsed against it, my chest heaving, sweat dripping into my eyes. Silence. For a full 10 seconds, there was nothing. No sound from the living room, just the frantic hammering of my own heart and the roar of blood in my ears. Maybe it was gone. Maybe it gave up. Maybe seeing me fight back broke the spell. Hope is a stupid, insidious thing. Then, the voice. It came through the thick wood of the door and the dresser, as if it was whispered directly into my ear. It was Ben's voice again. Calm, patient, amused. "Oh, you don't want to see me, Jake?" I squeezed my eyes shut. "No, don't listen." "That's not very nice," the voice continued, a playful, chiding tone weaving through the words. "After I came all this way? After I went to all the trouble of getting you ready, I thought you'd be happy to see me." I pushed myself away from the dresser, crab walking backwards until my back hit the far wall. I slid down to the floor, my eyes fixed on the barricade. It looked so strong. It felt so flimsy. "This is silly, Jacob," the voice said. "It's a game, all of it, but the game is over now. Time to put the pieces back in the box." I scanned the room, a desperate, frantic inventory for a weapon. Anything. The lamp on the nightstand? Its base was cheap ceramic. It would shatter into dust. A stack of paperbacks? I might as well throw pillows at it. My phone was on the floor where I'd dropped it near the window. Worthless. There was nothing. I was trapped. Defenseless. The playful tone in its voice vanished. It was replaced by something cold and flat. An absence of emotion that was more terrifying than any rage. I tried to be nice. Wham! The sound was an explosion. It wasn't a fist or a kick. It was the sound of a battering ram. The entire dresser jumped, sliding half an inch away from the door, its legs scraping hard against the floor. The oak door behind it groaned, a deep, guttural sound of wood being torn apart. A shower of dust and paint chips fell from the top of the doorframe. My heart stopped. My breath hitched in my throat. It wasn't trying to open the door. It was trying to remove it. Wem pate, another impact, harder this time. The sound was a physical blow. The dresser lurched again, moving a full 2 inches. I heard a sharp crack, followed by the high-pitched shriek of metal giving up. A hinge. The top hinge had just been ripped from the frame. The door now sagged visibly, a dark gap appearing at the top corner. I could see the dim light of the living room through the crack. It was inside my apartment. It was 10 feet away. And it was coming through. My brain, which had shut down in the face of the impossible, suddenly rebooted with a single, clear thought. Kitchen. The kitchen had knives. Not just steak knives, but the block Ben had bought last Christmas. The big one. The cleaver. It was a suicide run. The kitchen was on the other side of the living room. I would have to burst out of this room, sprint past the thing as it demolished my door, and pray I was faster. It was an insane plan. It was the only plan. I wouldn't make it out the window. I knew that now. The fire escape was its territory. It had shown me the Polaroid out there. It was waiting. This, the charge through the apartment, was a sliver of a chance, a 1 in a million shot. But it was better than 0. I scrambled to my feet, my body coiled like a spring. I crouched, my eyes glued to the straining, splintering door. I watched the gap at the top widen. I timed my breathing. Inhale. Hold. Wait for the next impact. The second the door came down, I would run. "Last chance, Jacob," the voice on the other side said. It wasn't a voice anymore. It was a dead thing, a recording playing through ruined speakers. "Give me the memory of you." I didn't know what that meant. I didn't care. Crack, boom. The sound was absolute. Final. The door didn't get kicked in. It disintegrated. It was punched clean off its remaining hinge, exploding inward. It slammed into the heavy dresser with impossible force. The combined mass of wood and memories, my last pathetic barricade, tipped over like a child's toy and crashed face down onto the floor with a deafening, echoing thud. The doorway was open, a dark, gaping hole, and it stood there. It wore Ben's form, a perfect silhouette against the light from the hall, Ben's height, Ben's shoulders. But the thing that was supposed to be a face was a nightmare of flickering pixels, a glitch in reality. The features, eyes, nose, mouth, weren't stable. They blurred and sharpened, smeared and reformed, a constant, silent war of a thing trying to remember a face it had stolen. The smile was the worst part. It would flash into existence for a half-second, Ben's easy, lopsided grin, before dissolving into a mass of twitching, spasming flesh. There was no time to think, no time to be sick. My body just went. I launched myself out of the starting block of my fear, not at it. To the side. I used the fallen dresser as a screen, vaulting over the corner of it. My sneaker caught on a shard of the broken door and I stumbled, nearly pitching forward onto my face. I windmilled my arms, found my balance, and just ran. The living room suddenly felt vast, an empty alien landscape. The apathetic water stain on the wall. The coffee table. The couch. My feet pounded on the hardwood floor, each step a cannon shot in the silence. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I could feel its gaze on me, a physical weight on my skin. I could hear the soft, deliberate rustle of its suit as it turned to watch me go. It wasn't chasing. Not yet. I hit the kitchen's cheap linoleum floor and my feet slid out from under me. I went down hard on one knee, the impact jarring my teeth. The knife block. It was right there on the counter. I lunged, my hand yanking at the drawers. Wrong drawer. Spoons, forks. Another one. Towels. Damn it. The block on the counter. My fingers fumbled, slick with sweat, slipping on the smooth wooden handles. Then they closed around it. The biggest one. The meat cleaver. The handle was cold plastic. The blade was a heavy, solid slab of steel. It felt real. It felt righteous. I spun around, gripping the cleaver in a two-handed, white-knuckled grasp. I raised it high, ready to bring it down. The creature stood in the center of the living room. It hadn't moved from the spot where it had turned. It was just watching me. The flickering on its face had slowed. The features were holding their shape for longer now, becoming a more stable mask of my brother. It tilted its head, an imitation of curiosity. Its mouth opened. The voice that came out was a sickening hybrid, a duet from hell. It was Ben's warm, familiar cadence, but underneath it, like a bad electrical current, was the dry, static-laced hiss of Cade's voice from the phone. It's time for the final replacement. It took a single, deliberate step toward me. Then another. Its arms hung loosely at its sides, the hands slightly curled. It moved with a smooth, unnatural grace, its feet barely making a sound on the floorboards. It stepped out of the shadows of the living room and into the harsh, direct light from the kitchen fixture above my head. And I saw it. From the crisp white cuff of the suit jacket, the jacket they buried him in, a single, thick black drop was forming, swelling like a blister. It caught the fluorescent light, gleaming with an oily, iridescent sheen. It hung there for a heartbeat, defying gravity. Then it fell. It didn't splash. It hit the hardwood floor with a soft, wet splat. The drop didn't spread. It didn't soak into the wood. It held its shape, a perfect, glistening dome of black ooze. It looked like a dollop of tar. It looked like a living thing. My eyes were glued to it. My blood ran cold. This was new. This was wrong on a level beyond anything else. The replaced objects, the voice, the flickering face, that was a violation of memory. This was a violation of reality itself. Another drop formed on the cuff of its other sleeve. It fell. Splat. Now there were two of them on my floor. Identical, dark, and still. The creature paused. It lifted its right hand, turning it over, as if it were seeing it for the first time. The mask of Ben's face held an expression of faint confusion. It flexed its fingers slowly, once. A thin, black trickle oozed from between the knuckles, running in syrupy lines over the pale skin. It wasn't bleeding, it was leaking. It was a container coming apart at the seams. It looked back up at me. The twitching in its face stopped completely. The blur solidified. This time, the smile that locked into place was not Ben's. It was too wide. It stretched the skin of the cheeks into taut, unnatural lines, pulling the corners of the lips up toward the eyes. It was a predator's smile, a smile of pure, alien hunger. It took another step, leaving a third black spot on the floor. "Let's see what you're made of, Jacob." That smile. Not Ben's smile. It was a tear in the fabric of his face, pulling the skin too tight over the bones beneath. It was the smile of a packed wolf looking at a lamb. The black ooze dripped from its cuff, a metronome counting down my last seconds on Earth. My thoughts were white noise. The cleaver in my hand felt like a toy, a joke. What was I going to do? Hack at something that wasn't solid? Something that was leaking midnight onto my floor? "Let's see what you're made of, Jacob." The double voice, Ben's and Cade's static, scraped against the inside of my skull. It took another step. Instinct didn't tell me to fight. It screamed at me to run. I didn't think. I reacted. With a guttural yell that tore out of my throat, I heaved the kitchen table. Not lift, heave. It was cheap particle board, but heavy enough. It screeched across the linoleum and slammed into the creature's legs with a hollow thud. It didn't stop the thing, but it made it stumble. A flicker of annoyance crossed the too-wide smile. That was all I needed. I dropped the useless cleaver. It clattered to the floor, and I bolted. I was out of the kitchen, past the couch, past the spot where it was untangling itself from the table. My destination wasn't the front door. I knew it would be waiting there. The only place was the bedroom. A door. A lock. Time. I needed time to think. I crashed into the bedroom, spun, and slammed the heavy oak door shut. The bang echoed, a final, desperate sound. I fumbled for the lock on the doorknob, the stupid, push-button privacy lock. It clicked into place. A meaningless gesture. I knew it was useless. It wouldn't even slow it down. I leaned my full weight against the wood, my ear pressed to the surface, my breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. Silence from the other side. A deep, listening silence. I held my breath, every muscle in my body screaming. Then, a low sound. A chuckle. The dual voice, muffled by the door, seeped through the wood. A new game? I like games. I scrambled back from the door, my heart a jackhammer against my ribs. I stared at it, waiting. My eyes scanned the room, a frantic search for anything at all. A weapon. A way out. The window led to the fire escape, where it had shown me the Polaroid. A trap. No escape. My gaze fell on the small nightstand beside the bed. Cade's things. I had cleared out his apartment last month and couldn't bring myself to throw them away. Just a few items. His worn leather wallet, a cheap disposable camera he always carried, and the silver pocket watch, the watch I'd found on my own nightstand this morning. The fake one. W.H. Yump. I jumped, a yelp escaping my lips. The whole door shuddered in its frame. It hadn't knocked. It had punched it. The sound was meaty and wet. Whump. A crack appeared in the wood, running vertically from the doorknob. Dust and splinters rained down onto the floor. It was coming through. My mind was a hurricane. I couldn't think straight. Escape. Weapon. Escape. Weapon. My eyes kept landing on the pocket watch, gleaming under the lamplight. Bile rose in my throat. I remembered the inscription, the cruel joke. You lost to it. Bam! This time the sound was sharper, louder. A deep, structural groan came from the door. The push-button lock popped out with a pathetic metallic sound. It was broken. Only the latch was holding it now. Another hit or two and the door would fly open. Panic gave way to a strange, sharp clarity. A clarity born of absolute terror. I lunged for the nightstand and snatched the pocket watch. The camera and wallet clattered to the floor. I ignored them. The watch was heavy in my hand, heavier than it should have been. The metal was cold, a deep, penetrating cold that seemed to suck the warmth from my palm. I stared at the face of it. The hands were frozen at 3:07. I flipped it over, my thumb tracing the ugly gouged letters on the back. You lost to it. No. The creature outside roared. It wasn't a human sound. It was the shriek of tearing metal and animal rage. It wasn't a voice anymore. It was just noise. Crack. The door jamb split, the wood around the latch plate splintering away. The door swung inward an inch, held only by the hinges. I could see the dim light of the hallway through the gap. I could smell something, like burnt sugar and ozone. My eyes were glued to the inscription on the watch. My brain was working faster than it ever had before. It wasn't mockery. The letters were wrong. They were too close together, crudely made. It wasn't a sentence. It was 3 words. 3 commands. U-U-E-I-T. A message. Not from the creature. From Cade. A message left on the replacement. A warning. A key. The watch wasn't a replica. It was an upgrade. The cold metal in my hand suddenly felt dense. Solid. I gripped it tight, my knuckles white. The inscription felt different now. I ran my fingertip over it. The letters weren't etched. They weren't carved. It felt like the metal itself had been melted and reshaped, fused into the body of the watch. This wasn't a timepiece. It was a weapon, a sound like a cannon blast. Boom! The world exploded in noise and wood. The bedroom door didn't get kicked in. It disintegrated. It was punched clean off its hinges, blasting inward in a shower of splintered oak. It flew across the room and smashed into the far wall, taking a framed poster with it. The doorway was a gaping, dark maw. The creature stood there, silhouetted against the hall light. It took a moment to let the dust settle, a predator enjoying the reveal. The form of Ben was still there, but it was decaying. The black ooze now dripped steadily from its cuffs and collar, forming a small, viscous puddle at its feet. The smile was gone, replaced by a focused, hungry intensity. Then I saw its arm. Its right arm was changing. The tweed of the suit jacket seemed to melt, the pale skin of the hand bubbling and darkening. The ooze wasn't just dripping from it, it was consuming it, reshaping it. The fingers elongated, fused together, and sharpened. In the space of 2 heartbeats, the hand and forearm became a single, solid piece, a long, gleaming blade of black, oily obsidian. It shone with a wet, hellish light. It took a step into the room, then another. It was coming for me. There was no way out. My back was against the wall. To my left was the wreckage of the door. To my right, the trapped window. Straight ahead was the nightmare wearing my brother's skin and carrying a blade made of shadow. I was going to die. The thought didn't bring fear anymore. It brought a strange, cold calm. I looked down at the heavy silver object in my fist. U-U-I-T. Okay, Cade. Okay. The creature raised its shadow blade, the light from the lamp glinting off its razor edge. It lunged. I didn't aim. I didn't plan. I closed my eyes and swung. My arm moved on its own, a desperate, clumsy arc. I put all my weight, all my terror, all my grief behind the swing. I felt a jarring impact, a solid, heavy connection. But there was no sound of metal hitting flesh, a sound ripped through the air, high and piercing. A shriek of feedback, of digital agony, so loud it felt like a spike being driven through my eardrums. I stumbled back, my ears ringing violently, my eyes snapping open. The creature was reeling, its blade arm forgotten. It clutched its head with its remaining human hand. Where the pocket watch had struck it square in the temple, its face was gone. The mask of my brother had vanished. The skin hadn't been broken or bruised. It had melted. Like hot wax, it dissolved away, revealing what lay beneath. It wasn't bone. It wasn't blood or brain tissue. It was a patch of utter blackness. A swirling, starless void that seemed to drink the light from the room. It was a hole in the world, and it was wearing my brother's suit. The creature screamed again, a sound that was no longer a voice, but a corrupted audio file, skipping and tearing itself apart. It stumbled back out of the bedroom, clawing at the hole in its own head. I stood there, panting, my arm aching from the force of the blow. My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. I looked down at my hand. The silver pocket watch was glowing. It wasn't a reflection. A soft, internal, silver-blue light pulsed from within the metal, making it warm against my skin. The cold was gone, replaced by a humming, living heat. I stared at it, then at the empty, ruined doorway where the thing had stood. It wasn't a replica. It wasn't a message. It was a weapon. And it worked. The thing screeched, a sound of static and grinding metal, and staggered back into the hallway. The hole where its face should have been was a vortex of nothing, sucking in the dim light. My chance. It was my only chance. There was no thought, just a raw animal need to live. I lunged out of the ruined doorway, past the splintered frame. The creature was to my right, clawing at the void on its head, its body twitching. It was between me and the front door. I didn't slow down. I lowered my shoulder and charged. I slammed into its side with all the force I had. It was like hitting a side of beef packed with broken electronics. The thing grunted, a wet, garbled sound, and stumbled against the wall. A smear of that black, oily ooze was left on the drywall. I didn't wait to see if it would get up. I wrenched the front door open. The chain lock was still on. Shit. My fingers fumbled with a slide, slick with sweat. The watch in my other hand was a warm, heavy weight, a humming anchor in the chaos. Behind me, I heard a wet, scraping sound as the thing pushed itself off the wall. The chain came free. I threw myself into the public hallway, not bothering to close the door behind me. I heard it shriek again, a sound of pure fury. The elevator was right there. The button was lit. A metal box. A trap. No, I pivoted and ran for the stairs. My feet pounded on the concrete steps, the sound echoing in the narrow stairwell. Down, down, down. I took the stairs too, 3 at a time, my hand gripping the cold metal rail, my knuckles white. Each landing was a blur of grimy windows and peeling paint. My lungs burned, my legs screamed. I didn't care, I just needed to get out. The fire door to the lobby crashed open in front of me. I burst through it, nearly colliding with a guy checking his mail. He yelled something at me. I didn't hear it. I was a missile, aimed at the glass doors of the building entrance. I hit the push bar and was out. The night air hit me like a physical blow. Cold. Sharp. It smelled of car exhaust and damp pavement. The city noise was a wall of sound, the howl of a distant siren, the rumble of a bus, the cacophony of 100 conversations I couldn't understand. It was real. It was normal. I stumbled onto the sidewalk, gasping for air, leaning against a lamppost. My heart was a wild drum against my ribs. I looked down at my hand. The pocket watch was no longer glowing, but it was still warm. Proof. It was real. All of it. My head snapped up. I looked back at my building. 4 floors up, my window was dark. The lights were off, nothing moved, no shadow stood there, no one was watching. Heaving a ragged breath, I pushed myself off the post and started walking, merging with the flow of people on the sidewalk. Faces passed me in a blur of neon and shadow. A group of laughing kids, a woman talking on her phone, a man walking a small dog. Normal. Safe. The anonymity of the crowd was a shield. It was over. I had escaped. My legs felt shaky, but I kept moving. I needed to put distance between me and that place. I didn't know where I was going. It didn't matter. Just away. My mind raced. What was that thing? What did Cade get himself into? Use. IT. He knew. He knew what was coming. He didn't leave me a replica. He left me a weapon against that. The thing wearing our brother's skin. The thing with a blade made of shadow and a face made of nothing. I was so lost in my thoughts I didn't see the woman until I bumped right into her shoulder. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice completely normal. She was in her 40s, maybe, wearing a simple trench coat. "No, my fault," I mumbled, trying to step around her. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." She smiled, a small, polite smile. She reached out and put a hand on my arm to steady me. Her touch was normal. Her voice was normal. Then she looked up, her eyes meeting mine under the orange glare of the streetlights. My blood ran cold. The smile was on her lips, but it wasn't in her eyes. They were blank. A flat, lifeless gray. Not just empty. It was the same dead, doll-like emptiness from the Polaroid. The eyes of the replacement. The eyes of the thing on the fire escape. How could this be possible? My entire body locked up. I stared at her, at the polite smile that didn't match the void in her gaze. It wasn't just wearing Ben's skin anymore. It could be anyone. "Let's see what you're made of, Jacob." The voice wasn't hers. It was the double voice, Ben's and Cade's, but quiet, a whisper coming from her smiling lips. It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. It was inside my head. I let out a sound that wasn't a word, a choked, strangled gasp. I ripped my arm from her grasp and stumbled backward, falling off the curb and into the street. A car horn blared, tires squealing as it swerved around me. I scrambled back to my feet and ran. I didn't look back, I just ran. I shoved past people, ignoring their shouts and curses. The street was no longer a shield. It was a hunting ground, a cage, and I had no idea which person was the zookeeper. My eyes darted from face to face. A man laughing into his phone. Were his eyes a little too blank? A teenager on a skateboard. Did his grin stretch a little too wide? An old man sitting on a bench. A young couple kissing by a storefront. A hot dog vendor under a bright yellow umbrella. Who is real? Who is fake? My breath came in ragged sobs. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic prisoner. Every face was a potential mask. Every person, a monster in waiting. The whole city, the whole goddamn city was a trap. There was nowhere to run. There was nowhere to hide. I saw a dark opening between two buildings, an alley. Without thinking, I veered into it, plunging from the noisy, bright street into near total darkness. The sudden quiet was deafening. The alley was a dead end, filled with dumpsters and reeking of garbage. I didn't care. I pressed my back against the cold, rough brick of the wall, sliding down until I was sitting on the grimy pavement. I buried my face in my hands, trying to breathe, trying to make my heart slow down. My body was trembling, an engine out of control. What do I do? What in God's name do I do? Call the cops? And say what? A woman with scary eyes whispered in my dead brother's voice? They'd lock me up. I was alone. Completely and utterly alone. That thing could be a block away, or it could be the next person to walk past the mouth of this alley. It was everywhere. My pocket vibrated. I jumped, a yelp escaping my lips. The phone. I fumbled in my jeans, my fingers shaking so badly I almost dropped it. An unknown number, a new text message. My thumb hovered over the screen. This had to be it. Another taunt. Another game. I braced myself. I opened the message. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a sentence. It was one word, all caps. Warehouse. Warehouse. The single word glowed on the screen, a beacon in the filthy dark of the alley. My heart was still a frantic bird beating against my ribs, but my mind latched onto the word. My thoughts, a panicked scramble seconds before, began to find a single, sharp point of focus. Warehouse. I knew that warehouse. Ben's warehouse. An old, cheap unit he rented out in the industrial park on the edge of town. A place to store his inventory. The weird architectural salvage and antique furniture he was always flipping. He'd been working late there the night he died. Is that what this was? A clue? It couldn't be the thing. The thing was a monster of static and shrieks and stolen faces. This was text. This was information. This felt like Cade. A breadcrumb. A lifeline. The hope was a desperate, stupid thing, but it was all I had. It was an engine, and it started right then, turning over in my chest. I pushed myself off the grimy pavement, my legs shaking. The watch was still a solid, warm lump in my fist. I shoved it and my phone deep into my pocket. I stumbled out of the alley, back into the river of streetlights and strangers. Every face was still a potential threat, every pair of eyes a possible void. But now I wasn't just a rat scurrying from the exterminator. I had a destination, a purpose. I raised my hand, my whole arm trembling. A taxi, its roof light, a yellow slash in the night, pulled over. I yanked the door open and fell inside, slamming it shut behind me. "Where to?" the driver asked, his eyes in the rearview mirror. I stared back for a second too long. His eyes were tired, bloodshot. They looked real. I prayed they were real. I gave him the address. The industrial park out by the old rail yard. He grunted, a sound of mild annoyance at the long fare, and pulled out into traffic. The city slid by outside the window, a smear of neon and concrete. I kept my head down, my gaze fixed on my own reflection in the darkened glass. My face was pale, streaked with sweat. My eyes were wide, my pupils blown out. I looked like a ghost. I looked like I was losing my mind. The drive felt like it took a year. The dense city blocks gave way to wider, darker streets. The noise faded. The buildings grew shorter, more sparse, until they were just hulking, dark shapes against a sky with no stars. Warehouses. Metal siding, chain-link fences topped with rust and barbed wire. Weeds growing through cracks in the asphalt. The driver pulled up to the gate. A single, tall sodium lamp cast a sick orange pools of light over the empty lot. "This is it," he said. I fumbled with my wallet, pulling out a couple of 20s and shoving them at him. "Keep it." I got out before he could say anything else. The car door slammed shut behind me with a hollow thud that echoed in the quiet. The taxi did a three-point turn and drove away, its red taillights shrinking into the darkness until they were gone. Then there was only silence. A deep, heavy quiet that was worse than the city noise. It was the silence of forgotten places. The wind whistled through a broken link in the fence. That was the only sound. I walked to the gate. It was locked with a heavy padlock. I rattled it. Solid. I remembered Ben cursing about it, how he was always losing his keys. And then I remembered something else. A conversation over cheap beer years ago. "Always have a backup, Jake. People are predictable." I scanned the low brick wall that bordered the fence line. I knelt, my hands running over the cold, rough surfaces. And there it was, a single brick, loose in its setting. I pried it out with my fingers. Underneath, nestled in the dirt, was a plastic baggie. Inside was a single rust-flecked key. My fingers closed around it. It felt cold and real. This was a sign. This was a path Cade had laid for me. The key scraped in the padlock. The lock sprung open with a loud click. I slid the heavy gate open, just enough to slip through, the metal groaning in protest. I was in. Warehouse Unit 12. I saw the faded numbers painted on the big, roll-up metal door. I walked towards it, my own footsteps crunching on the gravel, a sound that felt deafeningly loud. The air was cold. It smelled of rust and damp earth, but there was another smell too. Faint, something like ozone, like the air after a lightning strike. I felt it then, a pressure in the air, the feeling you get when you're in a room and you think you're alone, but you're not. The tiny hairs on my arms and the back of my neck stood up. I stopped, listened, nothing, just the wind. My heart was kicking against my ribs again. I took a deep breath, trying to force it down. To my left was a smaller, normal-sized door. The key fit in that lock too. I turned it. Another loud click. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, into absolute blackness. I fumbled along the wall for a light switch. My fingers found the cool, smooth plastic. I flipped it. A row of long, fluorescent tubes hummed to life overhead, flickering on one by one. The light was harsh, sterile. It revealed a cavernous space. The ceiling was lost in shadows 20 feet up. The concrete floor was stained with oil and dirt. Metal shelving units, stacked high with wooden crates and objects shrouded in dusty tarps, formed long aisles that stretched into the gloom at the far end of the warehouse. It was dead silent. My breath plumed in the cold air. I let the door swing shut behind me. The latch clicked into place. I stood there for a long moment, just listening. The buzz of the lights was the only sound, but the feeling of being watched was stronger in here. It was suffocating. The air was thick with it. I slowly scanned the rows of shelves, the towering stacks of forgotten things, the deep shadows between them. Nothing moved. I started walking down the central aisle, my boots echoing on the concrete. I didn't know what I was looking for. Another message? An object? The watch in my pocket felt heavy, a dead weight. Halfway down the warehouse, I saw it. Tucked away at the very end of one of the aisles was a small, partitioned-off section, an office. And its door was ajar. A sliver of light cut through the dark. A different kind of light. Not the harsh white of the overheads, but a soft, blue-white glow. The glow of a computer monitor. My blood ran cold. Someone was here, or had been, very recently. I found myself moving toward it, my steps slow, deliberate. I tried to make no sound, but every scrape of my sole on the gritty floor was an explosion. I reached the end of the aisle and peered around the edge of the metal shelving. The office was small. A cheap metal desk, a worn-out office chair, a filing cabinet, and on the desk a desktop computer, its monitor awake and glowing. The screen was blue. I held my breath. I listened. Nothing. No sound from inside. No breathing. No rustle of clothing. I took another step, then another, until I was standing in the doorway. The office was empty. My eyes were glued to the screen. A single file was open on the desktop. A video file. My heart hammered against my chest. The file name was simple. Chilling. K-final.mp4. My hand was shaking as I reached out and touched the mouse. The cursor blinked on the screen. It was waiting for me. I had to know. I had to see. This was why I was here. This was the answer. I moved the cursor over the play button and clicked. The screen filled with grainy black and white footage. A security camera feed. The timestamp in the bottom corner was from 2 weeks ago, the night Cade died. The camera was mounted high in a corner of this very office, looking down at the desk, and there he was. Cade. He was alive. He was scrambling backward, away from the desk, his face a mask of sheer terror. He knocked the chair over. He was shouting something, but there was no audio. His mouth was open in a silent scream. Then the other figure came into frame. Ben. It was Ben. He was wearing the same jacket he'd had on in the Polaroid. But there was something wrong. He wasn't moving like Ben. He moved with a stiff, jerky motion like a marionette with tangled strings. He cornered Cade against the filing cabinet. Cade was pleading, his hands held up. Ben, the thing wearing Ben's skin, reached for him. And then the transformation began. It happened fast. A glitch in reality. The thing's arms stretched, elongating, the joints popping at an impossible angle. The skin of its hand darkened, turning an oily, liquid black. It wasn't a hand anymore. It was a blade of solid shadow. Cade tried to fight. He swung, but the thing was too fast. It slammed him against the cabinet. The footage stuttered, breaking up into pixels and static for a second. When it cleared, Cade was on the floor, unmoving. I felt a sob build in my throat, hot and sharp. I wanted to look away, to shut it off, but I couldn't. I was frozen. The thing stood over him. It looked down at Cade's body, its head tilted. Then it began to change. Its whole body seemed to liquefy, to lose its solid shape. It shimmered, like a heat haze on asphalt. The features of its face ran like wax. The hair, the clothes, the very shape of its body blurring into a formless, writhing mass of blackness. A hole opened where its face should be. A vortex of pure void. It was the thing from my apartment. It stood like that for a few seconds, a monster of living shadow. Then, just as quickly, the shimmering began to reverse. The mass contracted. It pulled itself together, solidifying. Features began to emerge from the black ooze. Eyes. A nose. A mouth. The shape of a jawline. The jacket, the jeans, the hair. In less than 10 seconds, it was no longer a monster. It was a perfect, flawless copy of my brother Ben. It straightened the collar of its jacket, looked directly up at the security camera for a single, chilling moment, and then walked out of frame. The video ended. The screen went black. I stared at my own reflection in the dark monitor, my mouth hanging open. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a thing that had killed Cade, and now it looked exactly like Ben. It had hunted me. It had stood in my apartment. It had spoken to me on the street. The truth hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. It's a trap. The thought screamed through my mind. Cade didn't lead me here for an answer. He led me here to show me the nature of the cage. And in that exact moment of horrifying clarity, from the far end of the warehouse came a sound. Slam. The heavy, metallic boom of the main entrance door being thrown shut. It echoed through the vast space, a sound of absolute finality. It was followed, a second later, by a sharp, definitive sound. Click. The click of a heavy, electronic lock engaging. I spun around, my heart seizing in my chest, and stared out of the office. Down the long, dark aisle. I was trapped. A harsh crackle of static broke the silence. It came from a small, square intercom speaker, mounted on the wall above the desk. Then, a voice came through it. A voice I knew better than my own. A voice that was now the sound of my own personal hell. "Smart boy, Jake." It was Ben's voice, calm, amused. "You figured it out, but you still walked right into the trap." The voice in the speaker clicked off. For a second, there was no sound at all, just the hum of the fluorescent lights. The hum felt like a solid thing, a pressure against my eardrums. I was in a box, a locked box, and the thing that killed Cade was outside. My legs went weak. I backed away from the desk, stumbling over the chair Cade had knocked over in the video. I fell. My head hit the cheap metal of the filing cabinet with a hollow clank. The pain was sharp. It was real. I focused on it. Pain meant I was still here, still alive. Get up. The thought was a tiny flame. Get the hell up, Jake. I pushed myself up, my palms scraping against the gritty concrete floor. My breath came in, short, sharp gasps. My eyes darted around the tiny office. A cage. The door leading out into the warehouse was closed. I didn't need to try it to know it was useless. It was a flimsy interior door. The thing outside wouldn't even need the handle. The window. A single pane of glass looking out into the main warehouse space. It was high up, maybe 6 feet off the floor. An escape. Maybe. I looked back at the desk. The computer monitor was dark, a black mirror showing my own terrified face, and next to it, something I hadn't noticed before. A file folder. A thick manila folder, bulging with papers. Someone had written on the tab in thick black marker. 2 words. Project. Mimic. The word sent a jolt through me. Mimic. It was what the thing did. It copied. It replaced. Cade hadn't led me here to see how he died. Ben did. The real Ben. This was his office. This was his work. This folder was his. A clue. Not from Cade. From Ben. Left for me. The trap wasn't for me to die. It was for me to find this. The intercom crackled to life again, a sound like a snake hissing. "Find something interesting, Jake." Ben's voice was a lazy drawl. It sounded like he was smiling. I ignored it. My hands shook as I grabbed the folder. It was heavy. I yanked it open on the desk, papers spilling out. They were Ben's notes. Scrawled, frantic handwriting. Pages printed from the internet with passages highlighted in yellow. Complex diagrams of wave patterns and chemical bonds. I saw sketches. Quick, nightmarish drawings. A human shape, but the limbs were too long. A face that was just a smear, a hole opening in the middle. It was the thing from the video, the thing from my apartment. Under one of the sketches, Ben had written, "It doesn't kill, it consumes, it absorbs, it becomes." My eyes scanned the pages, my mind racing, trying to piece it all together. The pages weren't in any order. A clipping from a folklore website about doppelgangers, a physics paper about extra-dimensional resonance, a printout of an old newspaper article from the 1950s about a series of disappearances in a mining town in West Virginia. Ben had circled the name of the mine, the Silverwood Mine. My fingers stopped on a single neatly typed page. It looked like a summary. Subject, mimic. Parasitus dimensionalis. Origin, unknown. Hypothesized trans-dimensional bleed. Attracted to sites of intense emotional trauma or geologic anomaly. Nature, cellular replicator. Consumes organic matter and perfectly duplicates its form, retaining short-term memory fragments of the host. The copy is a shell. A perfect puppet. The original is gone. Weaknesses. 1. High-frequency audio resonance. A specific sonic key, approx 33,000 Hz, disrupts the biostatic field that holds its replicated form together. Prolonged exposure causes cellular breakdown. The copy destabilizes. It cannot maintain its disguise. 2. Silver-iron alloy, AgFe. Rare meteoric composite found in the Silverwood deposit. Direct contact with the alloy causes a violent, irreversible molecular decay. The alloy acts as a catalyst, forcing the mimic cells to cannibalize each other. It essentially eats itself from the inside out. Silver-iron alloy. The watch. The warm lump of metal in my pocket was suddenly 1,000 degrees. I pulled it out. Ben's watch. The one Cade gave me. Not a memento. A weapon. A single bullet. Figuring it out, aren't you? The voice from the speaker was closer now. Less amused. Ben was clever. Almost too clever. He got so close to an answer. It's a shame. All that work. My eyes flew back to the papers. I ripped through them, searching. If he knew the weakness, he would have tried to exploit it. He would have built something. And then I found it. The last page. A hand-drawn schematic. It looked like a small amplifier or a speaker, with a complex wiring diagram inside. Below it, Ben's frantic scrawl. Prototype complete. The frequency generator works. Not enough power to kill it, not with this battery source. But it's enough. It can make it show itself. It can make the mask slip. If I can just force it to reveal its true form, maybe someone will believe me. Maybe someone can stop it. Hiding it. They're watching the house. Watching me. The warehouse is the only safe place. Crate X73. God help me. Crate X73. A new sound started. A low, heavy scraping sound from the main warehouse floor. It was moving. It was coming for me. Time was up. You're not leaving, Jake. The voice purred from the intercom. The game is over. Ben lost. Cade lost. Now it's your turn. No. I grabbed the office chair. It was heavy, solid steel. I hefted it, my muscles screaming in protest. I looked at the window. It was my only way out. I took 2 steps back and ran at it. I didn't yell. I put everything into the motion. All the fear. All the rage. I swung the chair like a battering ram. The sound was an explosion. A deafening crash of metal against glass. The pane didn't just break, it shattered. It rained down on the concrete outside in 1,000 glittering shards. Cold night air rushed into the office. I didn't hesitate. I dropped the chair, put my hands on the sill, and hauled myself up. Shards of glass bit into my palms, my forearms. I ignored the pain. I swung my legs through and dropped to the floor on the other side. I landed hard, my knees buckling, but I stayed on my feet. I was out. I was in the open. And the sound was closer now. A heavy, rhythmic thump, drag. Thump, drag. It wasn't the sound of a man walking. It was the sound of something heavy being pulled across the floor. It was coming from the far end of the warehouse, near the main entrance. I took off. I ran down the nearest aisle, a canyon of teetering shelves and shrouded shapes. My boots hammered on the concrete, the sound echoing in the huge space. I scanned the ends of the shelves, looking for the code stenciled there. A12, B4. My lungs burned. Each breath was a razor blade. Where was it? Thump, drag, thump. D-rag. The sound was faster now. It had heard me. It knew I was out. It was hunting. I skidded around a corner into another aisle. The shelves here were stacked with old, heavy wooden crates, nailed shut, bound with metal straps. I saw the codes. W50. W50. 1. The sound was right behind me. So close I could almost feel the vibration through the soles of my shoes. I risked a glance over my shoulder. Down the long straight aisle, a figure stood silhouetted against the light from the far end of the warehouse. It was Ben's shape. Tall, broad-shouldered. But he was just standing there, watching me. A new sound came from it, a low growl that wasn't human. It rumbled through the warehouse, a deep, predatory sound that vibrated in my bones. Don't look. Just run. I tore my eyes away and kept searching. X-Series. Where was the X-Series? I rounded another corner, my side stitching with a sharp pain. And I saw it. X71, X72, X73. It was there. A large wooden crate, about 4 feet high, tucked against the back wall. It was my only hope. The footsteps behind me changed. The dragging stopped. Now it was just a dead run. Heavy, pounding footfalls. Coming at me full speed, it was done playing. I clawed at the crate. The lid was nailed shut. There was no time. I looked around wildly. On a shelf next to me was a heavy iron crowbar, red with rust. I grabbed it. The metal was cold and solid in my hands. I jammed the tip of the crowbar under the lid of the crate. I put my whole body into it, my muscles screaming. The wood groaned, splintered, thump, 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 thump. It was almost on top of me. I pulled again. A loud crack echoed through the warehouse as the nails tore free. The lid popped loose. I threw it aside and plunged my hands into the crate. It was full of straw packing material. I dug through it, my fingers searching frantically. The straw was dry and scratched my skin. Come on, come on, come on. My fingers brushed against something hard, metal and plastic. I grabbed it. I pulled it out. It was just like the schematic. A small, black box, the size of a lunchbox, with a large, conical speaker on the front. On the top was a single, large, red button. The prototype. I had it. A shadow fell over me. I froze. The pounding footsteps had stopped. Slowly, I straightened up. I turned around. It was standing at the end of the aisle, not 20 feet away, blocking the only way out. It was Ben. He was wearing the same jacket, the same jeans. But it wasn't right. The thing's calm, amused mask was gone. The thing that stood before me was something else. It was losing control. The right side of its face was perfect. It was Ben's face, his blue eyes, the small scar over his eyebrow. But the left side was wrong. It was melting. The skin sagged and ran like hot wax, the features blurring into a smooth gray putty. The hair on that side was gone, replaced by a slick, oily blackness. And the eye, Ben's left eye, was gone. In its place was a pit, a deep, black socket, perfectly round, perfectly empty, a hole that drank the light and showed nothing but pure, endless void. It tilted its head, a motion that was too sharp, too jerky. A sound came from its throat, a wet, clicking sound. It took a step towards me. Then another. Its perfect half-face smiled. Its ruined half just stared. You can't win, Jake. The voice was a nightmare duet. It came from the thing wearing Ben's face, but it was two sounds at once. Ben's lazy drawl, twisted and cruel, layered over a dry, rasping hiss that scraped the inside of my skull. The two sounds fought each other, twisting the words into something broken. I am the future. I am evolution. My mind short-circuited. My legs were stone. All I could do was stare at the ruin of its face. The perfect side, Ben's side, still smiled. The eye glinted with a cold, sharp intelligence. But the other half, the melting, putty gray half, was a testament to chaos. The black pit where its eye should have been seemed to pull the light from the warehouse, a tiny patch of absolute nothing. The black box in my hands. The prototype. It felt slick with my own sweat. A single red button on top. My thumb found it. It was a stupid, simple plastic button, like something off a child's toy. It felt ridiculous. It felt like my only chance in the whole world. Move! The thought was a distant command, shouted from a safe room miles away. The thing took another step. The motion was wrong. A puppet on a string, but the puppeteer was having a seizure. Its legs swung out at a bad angle, then corrected with a wet popping sound. Ben lost. Cade lost, the duet of voices hissed. Now it's your turn. My thumb slammed down on the red button. There was no click, no warning, just sound. It wasn't a noise, not really. It was a physical blow, a high, piercing frequency that bypassed my ears and went straight for my bones. It felt like a dentist's drill boring into the back of my neck. My teeth vibrated, the air grew thick, pressing in on me. I wanted to clap my hands over my ears, but I couldn't let go of the box. I could take it, but the thing in front of me couldn't. It threw its head back, and a scream tore out of its throat, but the scream was singular. The Ben voice was gone. All that was left was a pure, alien shriek of agony. It was the sound of grinding metal and tearing flesh, a sound that didn't belong in this reality. The creature's body began to convulse. The last pretense of being human dissolved in an instant. The melting accelerated, the skin on its left side sloughing off in wet gray chunks that hit the concrete with a sound like wet rags. The right side, Ben's perfect side, bubbled and popped. The blue eye stared at me in shock for one last second before it liquefied and ran down the collapsing cheek. The jacket and jeans it wore seemed to be sucked inward, dissolving into the thing's changing form. It grew taller, the limbs stretched, thin and wiry, joints bending at impossible angles. The gray putty of its flesh darkened, becoming a slick, oily black, like wet tar. It rose to its full height, maybe 8 feet tall, a skeletal, obsidian nightmare. The head was a smooth, oblong shape with no features, no eyes, no nose. Just a hole that opened in the center of the faceless expanse, a perfectly round maw that stretched wide in its silent, high-frequency scream. It was working. My God, it was working. A tiny, hysterical laugh bubbled in my throat. I was still alive. The thought died as the creature, in its true form, took a staggering step toward me. The high-pitched sound was hurting it, crippling it, but it wasn't stopping it. The intelligence was gone from its posture. The taunting was gone. All that was left was a predator. A wounded animal driven by a single, simple need. To kill the source of its pain. To kill me. It lunged. I scrambled backward, tripping over my own feet, my back slamming into the hard corner of a shelving unit. Metal rattled. A box of bolts teetered and crashed to the floor behind me. A loud clatter that was completely drowned out by the sonic shriek from the device in my hands. The creature was faster than it looked. Its long, black arms swiped at me, fingers like razors slicing through the air where my head had been a second before. I could feel the wind of its passage. It left 5 deep gouges in the metal shelf behind me. The sound of tearing steel was sickening. I kept backing away, down the narrow aisle. A dead end. Crate X-73 was behind me. My back was to the wall. The creature blocked the only way out. It was a cage. I was trapped. It straightened up, its faceless head tilting, as if trying to pinpoint me through the wall of sound that was tearing it apart. Its movements were jerky now, spasming. The black skin rippled and writhed, unable to hold its new form, steady under the sonic assault. My eyes darted around. Trapped, nowhere to go. The watch in my pocket felt heavy. A single bullet. But I had to get close. How could I get close to that? Whack! My mind raced, flashing through the last few days. The lies. The gaslighting. Cade's photograph, the tie changed to a color he never wore. The book on my shelf, his favorite, with a chapter rewritten into nonsense. My coffee mug, replaced with a perfect copy. except the handle was on the left side. It wasn't random. It wasn't just to drive me mad. The silver iron alloy. Ben's note. Direct contact causes a violent, irreversible molecular decay. The tie in the photo. It wasn't just the wrong color. It was silver. My silver tie. The one I left at his place. The book. The new chapter was about metallurgy. The coffee mug. The pattern on it wasn't just a pattern. It was a complex diagram. I didn't understand it then. I didn't see it. It wasn't a warning. It was a delivery system. Cade. Or whatever was left of him. His ghost in the machine. He wasn't haunting me. He was arming me. He was printing weapons into my life, hiding them in plain sight, things he knew the mimic wouldn't understand. A silver tie. A book of knowledge. A diagram. He was giving me the tools, piece by piece. The sonic device was Ben's plan. But the killing blow, that was Cade's. The creature shrieked again and charged, its long legs eating up the distance in the aisle in 2 massive strides. It wasn't trying to be stealthy anymore. It was a battering ram of black flesh and agony, no more running. Its razor-tipped claws swung down in a gleaming black arc. I didn't think, I reacted. I threw myself to the side, dropping and rolling. The claws slammed into the concrete where I'd been standing, throwing up chips of stone and dust. As I came up on one knee, my chance was there. The creature was overextended, its arm buried in the floor. It was struggling to pull it free. Its whole body was shuddering violently from the frequency generator. It was vulnerable, now or never. With a yell that was half rage and half terror, I threw the black box. It flew through the air, a perfect, clumsy spiral, and slammed square into the center of the creature's chest. It didn't bounce off. The creature's black, unstable flesh was like thick tar. The prototype sank into it, half embedding itself. The effect was instantaneous and apocalyptic. The high-frequency shriek, now broadcasting from inside its body, multiplied tenfold. The creature threw its head back, and its entire form began to violently fibrillate, like a film strip catching in a projector. It tore its arm from the concrete and staggered back, its faceless head swinging wildly. That was my moment. I surged forward, covering the 10 feet between us in a heartbeat. I yanked the silver iron pocket watch from my jeans. The metal was cold, impossibly solid in my trembling hand. It was the only real thing in this whole warehouse. The creature flailed, its long arms whipping through the air. One caught me on the shoulder, a glancing blow that felt like being hit with a steel pipe. Pain exploded in my arm, but I didn't stop. I gritted my teeth and drove forward, under its guard. I was right in front of it. It towered over me, a shuddering column of black static. I could smell it now, the scent of ozone and something else, something like hot, wet earth. I raised my arm, the watch held tight in my fist like a dagger, and I punched. I drove my fist straight into its chest, right where the sonic device was buried. I aimed for where a heart should be. There was a hideous, yielding resistance, like punching through a wall of cold, thick jelly. Then my fist and the watch sank deep into its body. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a light bloomed from within the creature. Not a bright light, but a sickly, blue-white fire, outlining my fist and arm inside its chest. It started where the silver iron watch made contact. A spiderweb of corrosive energy spread through its black form. The thing's frantic movements stopped. It stood perfectly still. A new sound began. A low, crumbling hiss. The sound of sand pouring out of a bag. The creature looked down, its featureless head tilting, as if in surprise. It looked at my arm, buried in its chest. Then it began to fall apart. It wasn't a death. It was an unmaking. The black flesh turned to ash, starting from the wound and spreading outward. Its legs disintegrated first, and the towering torso crashed to the ground in a cloud of thick, black dust. The ash washed over me, dry and weightless. It didn't even feel dirty. It felt like nothing at all. In seconds, the entire 8-foot monster was gone. All that was left was a pile of black powder on the concrete floor, the sonic device lying silently in the middle of it. Silence. The sudden, total absence of sound was deafening. The high-frequency shriek was gone. My ears rang. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. My whole body shook with a violence that had nothing to do with the cold. I was alive. I was standing. It was over. I pulled my arm back. My hand was covered in the black dust, and clutched in my fist was Ben's watch. I had won. I stood there, panting, sucking in ragged breaths of the cold warehouse air. I stared at the pile of dust, waiting for it to move. It didn't. It was just dust. Then a new sound started. It was quiet, digital, and it came from my own wrist, from the cheap, black digital watch Cade had given me. The one I wore every day. The one on my other arm. A synthesized voice, the kind from an old text-to-speech program. Cade's voice. The one from the video. It spoke 3 sentences, perfectly clear in the dead quiet of the warehouse. "Good job. Now, you're going to help me find a new body."